Regent Higgins. Oh.
For some reason or other, Ms. Radu put me here.
Yes.
Probably sooner if we'll look at me.
Good afternoon. Executive Director Radu, will you please call the roll?
Regent Bailing. Regent Bradley. Regent Delgado.
Here.
Regent Evers.
Here.
Regent Falvo.
Here.
Regent Farrell. Regent Hall. Here. Regent Harsey.
Here.
Regent Higgins.
Here.
Regent Manydeeds.
Here.
Regent Milner.
Here.
Regent Mueller.
Here.
Regent Peterson.
Here.
Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Pirath. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh. Regent Whitburn.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome new Regents, Jose Delgado, Regent Eve Hall, Regent Nicholas Harsey, and Regent Annika Pirath. Welcome, and we'll try and embarrass them in a couple of minutes. I have to apologize. You might have heard a very rowdy table at lunch. That was the table I was at, and I won't ask Provost Ernst to repeat the story that he told about poor Buffy. Before we get started, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Interim Chancellor Mark Mone and his team for their warm hospitality. As we make our annual visit to UW-Milwaukee, there are a lot of exciting ideas and activities going on here, and we look forward to hearing and seeing more about those developments in the next day or so. June, it seems, is a time for changing of the guard, and at this meeting we'll be saying farewell to several of our colleagues on the board, Regents Gary Roberts, Tracy Rybar, John Drew, and Chad Landis. Between these departures and those of Chancellor Sorensen, Hardin, and Lovell, as well as Senior Vice President Mark Nook, I foresee an avalanche of whereases coming your way. But let me say right now, we commend, appreciate, and thank you for your service, and there will be more to come. Changing can also be exciting, and we are pleased to welcome 4 new Regents. I mentioned their names a minute ago. Let me tell you a little bit about each one of them, and after I finish each one, I will ask them to make some comments if they wish. First, Jose Delgado of Brookfield is the former CEO of American Transmission Company, now retired. Jose earned his master's degree in business administration right here at UWM. He also has a master's degree from Marquette University in electrical engineering. Jose worked for We Energies for 27 years, initially as an electrical engineer and eventually as Vice President of Electric Systems Operations, before leaving for ATC. Jose serves on advisory committees for UWM, Marquette University, and St. Anthony's School System, among other commitments. Welcome, Jose.
Well, thank you. Just a brief word to say that I'm very glad to be here, and it so far has shown to be very enjoyable if some significant time involvement is necessary.
Thank you, Jose. Next, Dr. Eve Hall of New Berlin is president of the African American Chamber of Commerce. Eve earned her MS in Leadership and Supervision in Education right here at UWM, and her PhD in Education from Cardinal Stritch University. Notice I didn't talk about her undergraduate degree.
Okay. And I'll get you for that.
Florida, you know. In 2001, Eve began working for the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, directing a national school redesign program. She also coordinated international opportunities for students in historically black colleges and universities. Eve has previously worked for Family Services of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Public School System, and the Milwaukee office of former Governor Tommy Thompson. Her charge back then was to lead efforts in education reform. Eve's focus these days is on nurturing the development of African American owned businesses. Eve, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. And my undergraduate is Florida A&M University, of which he's also a cheerleader for. But we have a personal joke going on. We'll talk about that later. But no, I am very proud to be a member of the Board of Regents. This is my home state, my hometown, my alma mater, and I look forward to serving.
Thank you. We're also fortunate to have two new members who know firsthand what it means to be UW students in the 21st century. First, I'd like to introduce Nicholas Harsey of Middleton. Nicholas is studying mechanical engineering at UW-Madison and is a member of several student groups. He's active with Wisconsin Super Bikes, Vets, and the Wisconsin Gun Club. He served in the United States Marine Corps from 2008 to 2013, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, before receiving an honorable discharge with the rank of sergeant. Nicholas served as a platoon sergeant, infantry squad leader, and squad point man. His awards include the Combat Action Ribbon and the National Defense Medal. Nicholas, welcome, and thank you for your service.
I'm excited to be here. There's a lot I'm learning really quickly, and I look forward to all the things I can do in the future and continue to serve everyone around me.
Thank you. Finally, I'm also pleased to introduce Annika Purath of Mount Pleasant. Annika is a UW lacrosse student who is studying political science. She has been a member of the UW Lacrosse Lions Club, and she volunteers for the Lacrosse Children's Museum and at a local nature center. In addition, she is a member of UW Lacrosse Pre-Law Association. Annika, welcome to the Board of Regents.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. Being a student of UW-Lacrosse is an accomplishment that I take a lot of pride in, and I would love to share that pride in the UW system as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you. To all our new board members, welcome. And I should give you a heads up right now that we are breaking you in gently. Well, maybe not. We have some budget things to talk about. Here at your very first meeting, we will be asking you to do just that, take up the UW budget. And I do believe President Cross has some introductions.
Thank you, President Felbo. I'm very pleased to introduce 2 new members of the University Relations team, Jim Villa and John Diamond, both of whom came on board last month. It's been a busy time, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were a bit overwhelmed. Jim, would you stand, please? Jim is our new Vice President for University Relations. He supervises a team that is broadly responsible for internal communications, state government relations, and federal relations. I'm confident that Jim's experience in management, government relations, and marketing will help strengthen the system's relationship building efforts. Jim was previously President and Chief Executive Officer for the Commercial Association of Realtors and has extensive background in public policy. Joining Jim in managing communications is John Diamond. John, formerly of the University of Arkansas, John, or JD as he sometimes is called, manages the system's communications team and coordinates strategic communications. He's worked in higher education communications for more than 2 decades. In addition to previously serving as a majority leader in the Maine legislature, John, we're very pleased to have you here in Wisconsin. Welcome. I'm thrilled we were able to attract this talent, and I know they will all achieve great things on behalf of the UW system. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to officially recognize the service, commitment, and contribution of several of our colleagues who are leaving this board. First, I'm going to ask Regent Emerita Katie Pointer to present the Resolution of Appreciation to Regent Emeritus Gary Roberts. Gary's right there. Where's Katie? Oh, there's Katie.
Thank you, Mike. I'm incredibly honored to be speaking again before the board today to recognize Gary Roberts' lasting impact and contribution to the Board of Regents and the UW system. My time spent on the board overlapped with Gary's by over a year when I was a student regent from 2011 to 2013. This gave me the opportunity to work with Gary, where I was able to watch him listen, learn, and ask tough questions about the system and the way we do business. Gary has taught me a lot. As a successful businessman, Gary brought with him a powerful set of managerial skills and experiences that helped guide the work of the full board as well as the capital planning and business, finance, and audit committees he served on. I remember fondly one of the first times I met Gary. He was boisterously debating with a UW system staff member, which wasn't uncommon, while wearing a soft purple paisley tie, which could be likened to Regent Walsh's preference for a bow tie. And I thought to myself, I'm really going to like this guy. My intuitions proved correct as Gary became one of my closest colleagues and friend. His guidance both professionally on the board and personally as I wade my way through the turbulence of post-graduation life has been a welcome and cherished gift. I believe Gary's biggest contribution to this board was to challenge the status quo, to ask tough questions of staff and of other regents, and to constantly question how we can improve our system to deliver the best educational services for our students. Gary is a very passionate guy, which I think all of us remember so fondly at the La Crosse Board of Regents meeting last April. He was so articulate in his appreciation of that campus. Gary is appreciative of our great UW system and the people who serve it. I believe he's a candid voice and represents a very realistic view. He speaks like common sense Wisconsinites do. I find it coincidental, but worthy to note, that although Gary's time was short on the board, his tenure happened at a critical juncture in the UW system's history. His tough questions and tell-it-how-it-is personality were what the system needed. We should applaud Gary's forthrightness and aim as a board and as a system to always act in this way. Gary, thank you for your service to this board and to our system, but personally, thank you for your friendship. Now for the resolution. Whereas Gary Roberts contributed 3 years of dedicated service as a regent of the University of Wisconsin system from 2011 to 2014. And whereas Gary served on the Capital Planning and Budget Committee, ensuring that resources are invested wisely on behalf of the UW system's 26 campuses, 180,000 students, and the many stakeholders, faculty, and staff who support them. And whereas Gary assisted in finding ways to make education more affordable for our students by serving as the Regent member of the Higher Educational Aids Board. And whereas Gary has worked to publicly honor and reward the commitments of outstanding UW educators by serving on the Teaching Excellence Award Committee. And whereas Gary is a proud graduate of UW-La Crosse, having earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science and Psychology, and has since dedicated his professional career to fostering a more vibrant community. And whereas Gary helped identify the talent and vision of the next leader of the UW-Eau Claire campus through his participation on the Chancellor Search Committee. And whereas Gary approached financial and other challenges with a sense of purpose and resoluteness, once saying at a campus meeting, "We have problems, and that excites me, because a problem to me is an opportunity to make things happen. Let's all accept the challenges that face the system, and as a university, to make things happen." Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System extends its most sincere gratitude to Regent Gary Roberts for his leadership and invaluable service to the UW system and the citizens of Wisconsin. Gary.
Is it working?
Wow. Thank you, Katie. And congratulations to you, too, on your graduation and your new job. I think the system's fortunate to have you. My fellow Regents and Wisconsinites, I stand before you today, as a lot of Regents, emeritus, have done, Most have commented on how they were honored to being able to serve as a regent. I'm not going to say it was an honor. Excuse me, starting to cry. But it was an overwhelming responsibility. That responsibility gave me the opportunity to give back. But more importantly, it gave me the opportunity to not only question the status quo, but, well, I've already messed this up. I'm hoping we all share my sincerest belief that our state and our country was forged on the anvil of a diversity of opinions. As many of you are aware, my personal goals for this fine system are based on my own experiences in the business world. Perhaps those goals have seemed at odds with those who have developed contrary views of what is good for the university system and higher education in general. That is not only okay, but it is a fundamental reason why we as regents must continue to acknowledge the necessity that diversity of opinions must be the standard of all our great universities. I'm asking each of you to stand up and explore and exchange contrary opinions during your deliberations. During my short tenure here, I have observed some interesting activities and/or points of view. Please consider the following events at some of our educational institutions. Just recently, a guest lecture at a SEIU political and organizing director spoke at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater at one of the classes. He lambasted Republicans and Governor Walker for being racist. This racist diatribe was recorded by a freshman student. It went viral on the internet and got national attention. There was no alternate point of view presented to the students at the time. Amazingly, just incredibly, the Faculty Senate responded by unanimously passing a resolution banning the recording of any class without first getting the permission from the instructor. Chancellor Telfer was quoted as saying, "I believe it is important that our faculty and our students are able to have a free exchange of ideas without concern of what is said and communicated beyond the limits of the classroom and the campus." End quote. After serious consideration, Chancellor Telfer refused to sign the resolution. I believe it is important that this type of hate speech be exposed because lectures like this are being presented in the classroom setting as facts, when in reality, these lectures lack truth. And they are nothing more than an emotional, irrational, race-baiting, and propaganda-laden speech. Rutgers University, one of our Big Ten universities, Condoleezza Rice, the first black woman to have served National Security Advisor, as well as the first black woman to serve as the United States Secretary of State. We all know the story. The character of Rutgers' student body and the class of Rutgers' governing board became obvious. The New York Star-Ledger said the Rutgers faculty seemed intent on proving right the conservative complaint that America's colleges and universities are dominated by closed-minded liberals who restrict free conversation on campuses in favor of leftist indoctrination. Thankfully, there are still a few people with class like Condoleezza Rice. I'm honored, Rice wrote, to have served my country. I have defended America's belief in free speech and exchange of ideas. But these values are essential to the health of our democracy. But this is not the issue, she said. As professor for 30 years at Stanford, its former provost and chief academic officer, I understand and embrace the purpose of the commencement ceremony, and am unwilling to detract from it in any way. End quote. What is your reaction to these events? Should the University of Wisconsin system tolerate them? What is tolerated today becomes the norm for the future. This is the greatest university system in the world, and that did not happen by accident. It did not happen with a culture of intimidation, with an absolute lack of civility when it comes to lectures and or speakers that are representing something other than the left-wing perspective. It's not about liberals. It's not about conservatives. For a healthy academic environment, we need to encourage tolerance and be accepting of all views. I call it academic diversity. Thank you for this incredible opportunity, for it has been my pleasure to serve with all of you.
Thank you, Gary. Now I'll ask Regent Mueller to present a resolution of appreciation to Regent Emerita Tracy Rybar.
Good afternoon. Tracy, I had to push my way to the front of the line in order to be able to give this tribute to you. There were so many ahead of me, but I was determined to do so. You were one of the first regents that I met a little less than a year ago, and I was so taken with your wide, welcoming smile that I saw again today. And as I had the opportunity to work with you and observe you and become your friend in these last few months, I've been so impressed with what has made you successful. Your work ethic, your determination, your intellect. You have all of those attributes, as well as the attributes that preceded your appointment to the Board of Regents, and those are so important, being a wife and a mom and a small business owner and a student. And what a student you have been. Last month, you delivered the commencement address during spring commencement at UW Parkside, and you received the Chancellor's Award as that campus's top graduate. I saw a picture of you in the newspaper. You were covered in so many colorful ribbons and medals that I couldn't even see you in the picture, but according to the photo, it said it was you. And every one of those awards, ribbons, and medallions were well-deserved and well-earned. Tracy, I found an excerpt from an interview you gave when you were first appointed to the Board of Regents in 2012. And the interviewer asked you, to make your regent tenure a success, in your view, what will you have to accomplish? You responded, I would like to be an asset to UW system. I want to use my common sense, small business acumen, and student experiences to improve the system. Tracy, you exceeded those goals that you set for yourself. And so, on behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Regents, I am honored to present you with this resolution of appreciation for your service. And it reads as follows. Whereas Tracy Rybar served as a dedicated student representative on the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents from May 2012 to May 2014, and whereas Tracy has been an active and thoughtful member of the Diversity Awards Committee, where she demonstrated her commitment to recognize and support individuals and programs in the UW system that foster access and success in university life for historically underrepresented populations. And whereas Tracy has served on the Higher Education Aids Board, strategizing how best to make the college experience more affordable for UW students via loans, grants, scholarships, and other methods. And whereas Tracy increased awareness for the Association of American Colleges and Universities, Liberal Education and America's Promise, the LEAP program, which is a national benchmark for college learning and liberal education, being the first business owner in Wisconsin to sign the LEAP Employer Educator Compact, a pledge by employers to support a well-rounded education. And whereas Tracy served as chair of the Academic Staff Excellence Committee, ensuring that the finest UW system academic staff and programs are recognized for their success, their service and accomplishments on behalf of students. And whereas Tracy helped select new campus leadership for the Blue Golds as a member of the special committee for the UW Chancellor search. And whereas Tracy is a new Bachelor of Science graduate of UW-Parkside, having earned a double major in economics and business management with a finance concentration, an accomplishment of which Tracy says, "I now have the expertise and confidence to accomplish things I had previously only dreamed of. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System extends its most sincere gratitude to Regent Tracy Rybar for her leadership and invaluable service to the UW system and the citizens of Wisconsin. And especially we wish that all your best dreams come true." Thank you, Tracy. Congratulations.
Or here, just the top one. It's only one page. Thank you, Regent Mueller, for that wonderful introduction. As the mom in the household, I'm not used to having that many nice things said about me at one time. So that was very nice of you. Thank you. I know how long these board meetings can go, so my remarks here will be short. I would like to, at the outset, express my appreciation to Governor Walker for giving me this opportunity to represent non-traditional students throughout the state of Wisconsin. Like many Wisconsin residents, before I became involved with the Board of Regents, I literally had no idea what it took to maintain, grow, and help flourish such a wonderful system as we have in this state. In fact, when I decided to apply for my position as the non-traditional student regent, I took the first step of Googling what a regent was. I had no idea. What I did depend on, however, was an affordable, quality education, an alternative where people such as myself and my children could go. Declining high school populations, along with the importance of offering educational opportunity to adults throughout our state, ensures that non-traditional students such as myself and our new student, Regent Nick Harsey, will continue to represent a key demographic in the system. It's important to keep finding innovative ways to meet the educational needs of these students. I have enjoyed my time on the board very much. It was a wonderful, thrilling experience to give the commencement address at UW-Parkside, and I'd like to take this time to publicly thank the Parkside photographer, Don Lintner, for the picture that appeared in the Journal, Racine Journal and the Kenosha News. It is extremely difficult to look good in those hats, especially at my age, but he did a great job. So in closing, I would like to thank all the regents, President Cross, and everyone here at UW System for continuing to strive to make the University of Wisconsin an affordable, accessible place for everyone to get a good education. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. One of the best parts about taking our Regent show out on the road is the opportunity it gives us to learn more about the great campuses that make up the UW system. That is certainly true here in Milwaukee. Don't let the current scarcity of students fool you. UW-Milwaukee is a hopping place. Here to tell us more about that and what's going on is Interim Chancellor Mark Mone.
Thank you, President Falbo, and good afternoon. On behalf of our faculty, staff, administration, students, I would like to welcome you all to the UW-Milwaukee portion of the program. I also welcome you to Milwaukee. This is a wonderful city. I like to say on a day like today, when we have candidates in for jobs, we take them along the lakefront, we drive over the Hone Bridge, and we say, this is a so-so day in Milwaukee. And let them think about what a good day must be like. But here we are, and we have a great city. There's so many wonderful things. If you're a baseball fan, we're in first place. We're about to launch our season of festivals. And there's just a remarkable buzz in the air at this time of the year. We have, as some have told me, summer has begun, and there's a bit of a break. I've been in this interim role for about 3 weeks. I haven't quite seen that yet. And while I've been here in an interim chancellor role for 3 weeks, I want to put in perspective, I've been at UW-Milwaukee for 25 years. And I've worked closely in the Chancellor's office for the last several years, working specifically on a number of the initiatives that I'm about to share with you today. And I've also been able to develop for more than 15 years a lot of community partnerships and relationships in my role in the business school. So I think that I've got an informed perspective that, while new in this particular role, can bring some perspectives that you might find of interest. What I'd like to talk about at the beginning is some of the things that are happening here, and I'd like to position this in the recent context of this week. This week alone, there's been some headlines and some articles in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. You perhaps have seen them if we work from the bottom up. On the 1st of June, earlier this week, there was an editorial that actually had some very positive perspectives, but the bottom line, it underscored and reinforced the emphasis we need to have on jobs. And this was in the larger context of the recognition of Milwaukee Region as one of 12 federally recognized for access to $1.3 billion in federal funding that I'll talk a little bit more about. The second one, State Near the Bottom and Entrepreneurship. And we've been giving a number of talks. We've been doing a lot of research on the campus for a long time about what does it take for a community to truly thrive. And one of the things that we have been trying to do, if you've heard some of our earlier comments this morning in the READY Committee and some of the other presentations today, is to position UWM for that, to help move us in a different direction. And the third article that I just draw to your attention is that Milwaukee infant mortality rates are heading in the wrong direction. And this is not brand new. This is not news to anybody who's been familiar with this, but the impact of this is disproportionate in our community, notably with blacks having 3 times the incident of infant mortality as whites. And this is one of the indicators, as my colleague and friend Magda Peck, our dean of dean of the Zilber School of Public Health, frequently tells me this is one of the proxies, one of the indicators of population health, and it's simply unacceptable. There's a number of other headlines that we could talk about. We could talk about the quality of education and success rates. We could talk about income levels. We could talk about a number of different things. But I want to position UW-Milwaukee as having the possibility for greater impact than we've had on local, on state, regional, and global issues. And I'll position this in the context of my talk today using this format. What I'll do is, first of all, share with you, under the heading of Moving Forward Together, the ideas around our impact, some of the specific impact that we've had based on a recent study that came out a week ago. I'll talk a little bit about our capital projects updates. I'm not going to go into the weeds on those simply because we did 2 different reviews of those in different settings already today. Vice Chancellor Van Harpen did a very thorough job of a broad array of them. I'll next talk about our research and partnerships update. Joining me in our program today, specifically talking about some of the work that we do in the community, is the president of Milwaukee Metro Association of Commerce, Tim Sheehy. Thanks in advance, Tim, for your comments today, taking time out of your busy schedule. We'll then get into some things that I think are necessary to talk about while we're here in Milwaukee. Our current situation, some of the actions, and some of the outcome areas that we think are critically important. And then I'll wrap up with UWM's future. So as we look at the economic and larger impact of our region, this study was conducted by the North Star Consulting Group. David Ward and Bruce Siebold are the principals who conducted this study. And if you know David Ward, longtime administrator, and he's going to be assuming the interim Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs as Mark Nook leaves, we know David's work quite well. So I'm going to just hit the highlights. But trust me when I say there's about 50 slides and many pages of information behind these. So the traditional impact of UW-Milwaukee is that we have $1.5 billion in terms of overall economic impact. That's on the state alone. And this comes in the form of the wages that are spent, the real estate, a number of different activities that are generated by the university of our size. The 14,000, almost 15,000 jobs, those come from what we call 9,000 direct jobs at UW-Milwaukee, and then what they categorize is almost 3,000 indirect, and then another 3,000 what they call induced jobs, so a significant employer, and then $85 million in state and local taxes, and you can appreciate that in terms of the different categories from real estate, property, sales, local income tax, those different categories. But let's go beyond that. Let's go beyond the traditional numbers and take a look more fundamentally at what UWM's impact has been as well documented. What do we see? Let's start with our faculty. If you look at the faculty and academic teaching staff, there's 2,000 highly talented individuals, our bread and butter, our core, if you will, in terms of our critical strategic competencies, our faculty who make contributions in the research labs, in the classroom, in the community every day. Our staff who help make the university work in so many different ways, that from registering students to helping put the information technology together, all the different things that happen all of the time. At any given time, our students, the sheer number of students that we have. Last fall, we admitted almost 28,000 students, 24,000 of whom are from Wisconsin, by the way, and our graduates, immense numbers of graduates. We have over 150,000 graduates from UWM, and most of those, it's estimated, according to this study, that we're over 90% that stay in Wisconsin. There's simply no other university that can claim those types of numbers in terms of Wisconsin, in terms of drawing from our state citizens and then keeping them here. Supporting the M7 clusters, many of you know M7 is the southeastern 7 Wisconsin counties. Milwaukee 7 is what they're known as. There's a number of clusters. When we look at regions that thrive, they focus on clusters. And Tim, again, your work in that area in terms of leadership there has been absolutely essential. Information technology, water, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, financial services. These are the types of jobs for which we prepare students in terms of what we call some of the driver types of industries, and these are critically important for the future. They're not the only things that we do here. I'm going to give you a broad array of a number of different things that we prepare students for, but these are some principal ones that have been identified in this study. The income effect is dramatic. It's estimated in this study that the difference between a student graduating from college and not is about $24,000 a year. And if you multiply that out, the numbers are absolutely staggering, estimated to be from UWM graduates $1.5 billion in terms of lifetime earning differential. This is substantial. This is what we talk about in terms of the income effect. And then finally, research and innovation, which we've been having discussions about in the READY Committee and some of the others this morning, but I'll share with you some of the more specific types of activities. But that's the true difference that we make as a research institution with our strategic vision to be a top-tier research university that's the best place to learn and work for students, faculty, and staff. So that's some of the impact, broad level. Let's move on and talk about how we equip ourselves, how we absolutely are preparing ourselves based on the Milwaukee growth initiatives that have been supported by the state over the years. And let's talk about just a little bit of the impact. There's so many stories behind each of these that I've got to be careful not to go into excessive detail, but just at the highest level, as we start on campus, just west of this location where we sit today is what we call the Kenwood Interdisciplinary Research Complex. This will be opening between next spring and next summer, so sometime in spring or summer of 2015, and it will house our physics area, applied chemistry, public health labs, and other research areas that are pivotal as we look at some of the STEM and other related disciplines on campus. Long overdue if you look at where the work is actually occurring. So this is substantial right here on our main campus. We do have, however, 4 other locations. So as I take you through some of these different locations, I think you'll see the impact that we have in different areas. The Freshwater Sciences Building, if you saw today in the Milwaukee Business Journal, there was a behind-the-scenes look. There's both a slideshow and a full article that Allison Bowder did a great job in terms of sharing the history, the decades of work that our Great Lakes Freshwater Institute has done, and now we're moving into one of the great freshwater research institutions, schools, graduate schools in the country. Novel, innovative, and important. I'm going to put that together with another set of activities that are happening at the Global Water Center. These build on the 140 member companies of the Water Council that are committed to making a difference because of their vitality and their particular areas of interest. Some of the key members include A.O. Smith, Badger Meter, Rexnord, but there's all sorts of different activities that are occurring. We lease the 7th floor of this building and have partner relations with a lot of other organizations. I shared earlier today in one of our committees the importance in a Fortune magazine article that talked about water becoming the most important asset class, far superior to oil, coal, anything else in terms of the future. This article, by the way, talked about the global water crisis, and it just separately, I understand this week that Dean Amhaus talked exactly about this article as well. The impact is quite dramatic. It's a global issue with local impact all the way through. If you live in Waukesha, you can appreciate the importance of water as we've been seeing for the last several years. But if you lived through cryptosporidium issue in Milwaukee some 12 or 15 years ago, again, you appreciate the importance of this. As we move on, we will have an opportunity tonight to view what we are calling our Innovation Campus. And the importance of this cannot be stressed enough. I met recently with Dr. John Raymond, the president of the Medical College. Last week when we met, the first thing he said is, Mark, I need to understand in terms of the transition and going forward, do you have the same priorities that the UWM and the system has had with regard to this? And I said, John, absolutely. This is so much, that we have so much vested, there's so much in terms of the interactions that we have with students, faculty, research partners in terms of so many different areas. They start with one of the key pieces, but there's many more. One of the key pieces is the Innovation Accelerator building, where we'll be hosting a reception tonight. You'll learn more. I don't want to steal all of the thunder, but this is the outside shell. We opened this in the last month. It's a wonderful facility for a number of different things. You're thinking, what are some of those different things? Let's take a look inside this building. If you look at the different areas, and I appreciate you may not be able to see, this is a bit of an eye chart depending on where you are in the room, you see at the heart of it a number of different areas that include the bioengineering, some of the rehab, ergonomics, rapid prototyping, a clean room. All of these things reflect many of our faculty's interests. There was a competitive process with over 70 faculty applying interested in this, from which we picked about a half a dozen folks that are working specifically with some of our different partners. So you can see the pictures of some of the faculty, and then you can also see how we have specific relations with Froedtert Hospital, Medical College, Children's Hospital, and a number of other partners. Again, more details tonight in terms of some of the specific areas as we look at that in terms of the capital projects. How that is important in terms of some of those projects themselves. What they lead us to is the third portion of this talk, which is to talk about our research and partnership update. We have been recognized, Milwaukee Region, out of 80 different areas that applied for this, to be one of the 12 that are picked for federal program on manufacturing. What does this mean? There's $1.3 billion at stake. We have preferential treatment for achieving federal funds, which this state has long been neglected in terms of overall federal funding. So we have this great opportunity, an inside track, if you will. We beat out 58 other entities that were applying for this, and this really recognizes the potential for training, for research, for us to really move Wisconsin into the forefront in terms of manufacturing in the advanced stages of research that we can specialize in. In terms of other research and partnership updates, at the top level, top of the waves type of summary, I shared in more detail this morning a number of different components behind each of these. So I'd just like to hit a summary, and there's more details and notes if you are interested in these. The state had a program that they funded last year, $22.5 million in different research incentive grants. We were fortunate to be a participant in 4 of those, with 3 of those being led by UW-Milwaukee. The first is the Water Technology Accelerator, and I've talked a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in water, and that's been something where we partnered with our friends at UW-Parkside. The second grant was in aquaculture and aquaponics, specific areas in research and training with a number of different activities. Again, we work with UW-Parkside and UW-Whitewater on this. And the third piece is in terms of Wisconsin Applied Chemistry Center, where we're doing research, training, and development that applies to 7 different industry clusters where there's tight partnerships. These are where we basically bring grants so that faculty can work with industry on a number of applied types of initiatives. And then finally, while it seems self-explanatory, I want to talk a little bit about how we address the nursing shortage. We have a statewide initiative here that has Eau Claire involved, UW-Milwaukee, Madison, and Oshkosh, and this is led by UW-Eau Claire. We can all appreciate the shortage of nursing, and this is something that we're taking an important step in helping address, but it's also nursing education, training, and the development really spanning this. To give you an example of what we do every day in terms of the transformation that I like to talk about and the impact, back to that for a moment, today we have a number of different nursing students in 182 locations in southeastern Wisconsin that are changing the lives, improving the health of our community. This is a substantial type of investment that we've made. Another example is where we are part of an 8-institution, what is called a Science and Technology Center. They're very prestigious. In the last 4 years, only 3 of them have been awarded, and we're working with State University of New York Buffalo as the lead institution, and we're a critical partner looking at some of the protein imaging in terms of expediting and speeding up the impact that this type of initiative can have with a number of key research faculty on our side. We have been part of what we call MWork, or the Midwest Energy Research Consortium. This has 4 universities. We've been joined a couple of years ago with UW-Madison, that's the other Wisconsin institute in MWork, 4 industry partners, and the U.S. Department of Energy on a substantial set of initiatives that have looked at research, developing a consensus that involves 900 different companies. The focus, however, is primarily on Wisconsin as we participate. Interestingly, the federal grant authorization in terms of the increased funding of that $1.3 billion, one of the key partners in the application was MWork, and so we've been able to help contribute to that as well. Our Student Startup Challenge is the nucleus of bringing students into entrepreneurship, bringing research, bringing applications to industry forward. We have been involved with this for the last 3 years. In the first year, we had 3 teams that were recognized. Last year, 8, so a total of 11. We're in the application process right now. We've had some student teams that have actually launched businesses, have been recognized, receiving additional seeded funding. And it's just remarkably energetic, and this is something that we have received state funds, and 3 of our schools and colleges on campus have contributed to this. One of the similar areas is where we look at the Mobile Innovation Lab. Some of you might have heard about this. We call it the App Brewery, and we've gone into specifically many of the nonprofits and helped them with their smart technologies. How do we develop better software? How do we develop better not only applications, but then how do we use the research? How do we use the data that are collected through our smart phones for that? This is something that's novel. It's really gotten a lot of great press, and it's a wonderful way to bring students into the research that we're doing with very practical, job-related types of skills. So it really does a nice rounding out. I'd like to talk a little bit next about what we call WisCamp, which is the Wisconsin Alliance for Minority Participation. And this is something where underrepresented populations are engaged in undergraduate research. It's been federally funded, as well as the UW-Milwaukee has contributed funds to this. And the principle behind this is to put students into situations where they're doing hands-on research projects from which they learn and contribute back to the different partnership organizations in which they're working. This is under the leadership in our what we call Global Inclusion and Engagement, led by Vice Chancellor Joan Prince. You might be wondering, what's that person doing with that flashlight on their head? Well, this is a person who has aspirations. This student, Juan, wants to be a veterinarian. And so he's actually leading a research team that's waist deep in this pond, and they're checking out sound and vibration to understand better how frogs mate, how males and females respond to these different vibrations and noises. It's just fascinating type of work that they're doing. Shifting gears, one of the notable works from our humanities is the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee. This is a project that's been going since 2007. It'll probably be close to completion in 2017, so it's a decade-long project. It has received funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. It will have 1 million words, 7,000 entries, and provide a rich encyclopedia that's a resource for the community to understand our history and many different aspects of the community, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I want to thank the leadership of our Wisconsin Distinguished Professor Margot Anderson, as well as Associate Professor Amanda Seligman, for their leadership on this important initiative. Another set of activities when we talk about partnerships and research is one that our Peck School of the Arts has put together, one of the most prolific, bounteous opportunities, 350 different arts performances that include dance, music, film, an array of other activities on and off campus. And you can see a few of the examples. I was able to attend one of the events on Friday night for summer dance, and it's just wonderfully magical. As we're talking about Peck School of the Arts, let me tell you a little bit about one of our graduates and one of our faculty. This is what we call All About Godzilla. You might have heard about and seen the latest in terms of the 2014 version of Godzilla. We had a special feature last week, and why we feel this is important when we're looking for what I like to call our inner Godzilla is when we have an opportunity where one of our student alum, a fellow named Jim Riegel, who won 3 Academy Awards for his work on Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, he was the special effects producer, and it was his company that helped for Godzilla to be able to put the pieces together. So last Thursday night at the Marcus North Shore Cinema, we had, for the first major event in a new theater with complete new seating and 3D effects, we had a lecture from Professor Jason Jones, who shared with us his forthcoming book that talks about how important Godzilla is, especially in Japanese society, the cultural impact, because if you know the history of Godzilla, how important this was. And in a broader societal context, that then we saw this movie that one of our alumni really helped put together and had a Skyped interview with Jim Riegel from his home in California. And it was fascinating in terms of how the movie was produced and all his experiences at the Peck School of the Arts that contributed to him being able to develop the technologies, build the teams, and create this remarkable product. And by the way, he's been the key leader on 30 feature films that would be from Star Wars to so many other films that you would recognize. It's a great alumni type of event, and so that's a little bit from our Peck School of the Arts perspective. I'd like to now pull some of the themes together by showing you a short video, and it talks about how one of our professors, her name is Masa Ranji, she's an assistant professor, and she has done some work that really changes lives and can greatly reduce the invasive nature of the work by using light. So let me get out of the way here and have her take it away.
When I was a graduate student and I was, making these instruments in the lab, the question always for me was the so what question. And the so what is, okay, you're making this fantastic imaging tool, but how can you impact the lives of people with that? By making these bioengineering tools, we hope to be able to save lives and improve the quality of life for human race. The optical biopsy technology uses light to assess the health of the tissue. We use ultra-low and blue light and shine them on the tissue. The healthier the tissue, the brighter the glow. The reason we use optical biopsy is that it's non-invasive as opposed to gold standard technology that is basically physical biopsy of the tissue. It brings us the same kind of information, but non-invasively by applying only light. I'm working with doctors at Medical College of Wisconsin. Right now, we are using animal model organs, and we'll begin with human organs soon to show the clinical transferability of these tools that we use.
So this is one of the examples of the type of work that's actually happening at an innovation accelerator park type of setting. Professor Ranji is one of our faculty who will have operations there. As we move forward then from this, as we go forward, what I'd like to do is talk now, the fourth portion of the talk is about how our current situation, what we are looking at, and some of the responses that we'd like to undertake as we move forward together. So you'll see 4 different areas here where I want to talk about doing great things on an extremely lean budget, first of all, and then we'll go through and talk about some of the demographically induced enrollment declines, some of our revenue decline situations, and then faculty and staff morale. So as we look at these, I'm going to back up a little bit. As we look at these, first of all, like many Wisconsin institutions, what I would say in a nutshell is we're incredibly lean, underfunded, and we need to have a recommitment of the investments that have made us great. If we don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for us to continue to fulfill the commitments that we have. It's just that stark and that blunt. So all the great potential, all the great things we're doing very well, but it's extremely lean budget that we have today. And I'll talk about some of the consequences of that in terms of some of my other areas. But in the capital project area alone, what we basically have is a number of things that I like to say the ground has been broken, the infrastructure is up, but we need that recommitment for us to be able to put the programs, the faculty, staff, equipment, and so forth to really flesh these out and have that kind of impact. So that's in a nutshell one of the key ideas. In Wisconsin, we have all faced demographically induced enrollment declines, some more, some less. But if I flip forward to what I mean by that, let's talk about the demographics. At a quick sketch level, what you see on this chart is that from 2009 through 2013, we've experienced about a 6,000 student decline in terms of high school graduates over that period. As you look at our enrollments, well, we don't track exactly. We haven't lost 6,000 because they don't, of course, all come to UW-Milwaukee. But I think we can all see a similar type of trajectory in terms of what our challenges have been. We were at a peak, actually, of almost 31,000. We might have broken that. And then we today are at, currently last fall, not quite 28,000 students. So you can imagine the impact of that in terms of, from a tuition revenue perspective, what the consequence of that has been. As we move forward and talk even further about that in terms of revenue declines overall, again, no surprise, no secret, we're not alone. This is higher education today, especially in Wisconsin. We have the tuition freeze, we have budget cuts, and we have limited base and GPR funding. So as we look at this relative to our peers, what many of our analytics would agree, internal and external, is that we're 30% behind our median peer institutions. So that's just stating something that's important to recognize. So again, being asked to do more with less is the perspective. One of the consequences of this, especially felt in a research university, is the impact on our faculty and staff morale. We did, as part of a UW system study in 2012, an examination of all of our risks. And we identified 80 different risks. And over a several-month period, the number one risk that emerged was this issue that I'm sharing with you. I don't think it's a secret if you've been at a UW system institution. It's a chronic type of thing. But it's particularly problematic because other research universities are very competitive and really find us to be a great place to find faculty. And this is a particular challenge for us, and it affects the future of our ability to continue to deliver the type of impact that I've been talking about in terms of the training, the research, the education. So I have to put that out there. This would not be a balanced perspective without that. These are some of our star faculty and staff that you see in terms of the pictures, some of our recent award winners. So what are we going to do about this? Right? That's the heart. That's okay. How do we go forward? Let's share some of the pieces. How do we have self-sufficiency? How can we work together? How can we get your help to provide the type of support that we need? What I'm going to do is share with you 4 things. Where do we want to go? That's what I call target outcomes. I'm going to talk next about some of the specific action areas. That's the what. Then we'll talk about pathways, which is the how. And finally, we'll talk about impacts. So as we go through these real briefly, start with the target outcomes. Increased enrollments is going to help. It's not just about the top line, though. It's the retention as well. We are not doing the right thing. Our provost this morning talked about what we want to target, 6-year retention rate. Provost Britz, I think you used the term, we want to aim at 50% instead of currently where we're about 43% for the 6-year graduation. We need to do better. We simply have to do that for the students that we have that come into Wisconsin. So it's about enrollments, yes, top line, but it's also about the retention and the quality types of things that our Associate Vice Chancellor Phyllis King talked about with the Education Committee this morning. We are on the path, and as a central part of our vision, to increase our research profile to become top-tier research. That brings with it also revenues from which the indirects off of grants can be something that really helps provide additional resources. But that higher research profile is entirely consistent with the types of activities that we are engaged in. And that's why there's so much promise behind this $1.3 billion in federal funding possibilities there. Greater financial viability will result from these, but we also have to look at increased and creative ways to identify sources of funding. More on that in a few minutes. Stronger brand image, of course, is a wonderful outcome that we all need and want to have. And then enhanced pride and climate. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we get there. What I'd like to do is now share why these are so important. The emphasis here comes back to our students and the transformative effects that we have on individuals' lives. So I'll share with you some of the recent graduates and the things that are happening in their lives because of what we have been doing.
My journey was ultimately a path towards independence.
I'm preparing for my career after college because that's what college is all about.
I really was able to stand on my own 2 feet, and that was a nice feeling.
It makes me feel like I have a purpose, and I love that.
Quite frankly, without UWM, I wouldn't be here.
I'm a product of Milwaukee Public Schools, something I really hold near and dear to my heart. And by the time I came to college, I really fell for just international globalization, concepts of that nature. And in 2012, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Cairo. It was just really interesting to come into the country that was still in the midst of a complete overthrow and regime change. What really stands out to me about this whole college experience was that in 5 years, I've just changed so much. I feel like I've become a well-rounded person.
Got over 100 years in the Milwaukee Fire Department. My great-grandfather and his brothers, then my grandfather, my father, my brother and I are currently on the Milwaukee Fire Department. There's a whole world behind that iconic Americana of the fire truck driving down the road. The background paperwork and the making sure that the men and women out in the field have the resources that they need. The very first class I took, it was as if he was handing me the answers to the questions I had the day before. It was like a gift, being able to learn from these tried and true professionals and apply it almost immediately. My grandpa always said, do what makes you happy. And I don't know what else I could be doing right now that could even equate to how happy I am.
I was fortunate enough to get a job right away after graduation. I'll be officially working here at Children's. Medical laboratory scientists is the unseen heroes. They are behind the scenes doing the hard work that doctors and physicians ultimately make their decisions from. And that's how they move forward to making the kids ultimately healthy. And that's what drives me at the end of the day. And I honestly love to feel like I'm making a difference.
It's an inspiration to get into nursing, being bilingual, because there's a lot of Hispanics in this community. And I feel like it's better when you can talk to them in their primary language and they might be able to understand better. I'm really excited to start as a full-time nurse at St. Luke's on the heart failure unit. I like the science behind nursing and also the fact that you can use that science as a background to help people with their lives.
Most people make fun of the architecture students because they know we practically live in our studios. People would say that's my second home and studio, but it's actually my first home. I'm constantly doing something and usually not sleeping much. I work here at HGA, Architects and Engineers. A day in the life of an architecture intern isn't the same as what you would think a normal intern does. They do everything that everybody else would do. So we work with drawings, we work on the computer, we sit in meetings. We do everything that teaches us how to be an architect.
So isn't that neat? That really brings together the education. Thank you. Thank you. That really just culminates so many of the ideas about where we're going, to include in so many ways our teaching, our research, our transformative effects that students have that impacts their careers that we're such an important part of. So that's where we're going, and we need to now talk a little bit about the what, how, and then the bigger so what. As we look at one of the key areas we need to get ahead of, and President Cross shared some perspectives on this with me when we first talked about where UW-Milwaukee is at. We really need to look very seriously at this enrollment management issue. There's no question about it. So we are meeting on Monday. We're having a deep dive meeting. We're having a retreat later that I hope is unlike any other that we've ever had, to really focus on some of the specific concrete action areas that we need to have, some very specific activities with focus and urgency. We know that for fall 2014, much of the population the student population is largely there, but what can we do on a retention front, and then especially for fall 2015 and beyond to help stabilize and put enrollments on a different trajectory. We are in the midst of finalizing our strategic plan, which has as its thrust 4 key areas. One is around top-tier research aspirations, increasing student excellence outcomes, looking at community commitment, and then creating a culture, an institutional culture in which all those things can be achieved. Those are the key thrusts that we want to complete and implement. Our fundraising campaign has as its heart, with our leadership of Vice Chancellor Pat Borger, a number of key components, but the pillars revolve around our research, our student success, scholarships, and things that really help us with that transformation. I'm pleased to report we haven't lost a single beat. We are continuing and have the campaign co-chairs that are talking about in public have stated we're ramping up. I've been meeting with them regularly and just absolutely thrilled with the progress that we're making, including some just neat meetings this week. So we're in the quiet phase, or I'd share a little bit more with you, but I think the progress is very strong. We want to continue to move UW-Milwaukee forward, and there's a couple of key pieces. We have been a significant partner in the community on so many different fronts. If you think about key metrics, we need to do more. We need to be focused and organized, and we will be part of some of the requests going forward for future state support as part of some of the community and urban engagement type of work. The pathways, a little more detail now. That's the what. Let's talk a little bit about the how. Being a student, a longtime student, with my background in organizational management, strategic planning and other things, what I see as the critical piece is there's leadership that's important across a lot of levels at this campus. But one of the key pieces is at the Chancellor's Cabinet. And we've talked in the last week to 2 weeks, both in terms of one-on-one meetings and collectively, about the ideas around collaboration, leadership, and mutual accountability that really has a nucleus of positive, powerful force moving forward, building on the great strengths that we have in the Cabinet. We need to be more creative about the funding sources and directions, so be prepared. Everyone here will be a part of this, but we absolutely need to look, like all of higher ed today, at what are the funding sources. We can imagine a future in which, if you've read the book Public No More, this is a trend that has been happening for the last several decades, and it is likely going to continue. It's going to be very hard. Now, that said, several states, I think Johannes, you've shared that 32 states, we're confirming the data, but 32 states have turned the corner and beginning to invest much more in higher education today. So that's certainly something that we think is important. Faculty and staff compensation after the last 5 to 6 years has to be an important part of the conversation. I'm fortunate that I have a number of UW system chancellor colleagues who have this on their radar as well, and we've had some preliminary discussions, and we need to move concretely forward on this. The way we have funded this, it just has not been something that I would say is sustainable in the context of if we want to retain our talent, and that's absolutely a top priority. The branding and image, how important are marketing, communications, the role of athletics. Those are specific areas that we are examining and looking at and opening up a lot of important discussion around how do we portray ourselves, what are the real great things that are happening, how do we get the word out to an even greater degree. And then finally, engaging key stakeholders to a higher level of work. The students, faculty, staff, alumni, community, leadership council, these are a number of the different areas, and they're not exhaustive. Now, if we talk about the so what, what's the impact going to be? As I'm about to hand this over to Tim Sheehy to provide some perspectives, let me just hit the highest level if you stand back and say, what does this mean about UWM going forward? Innovation and job growth. You have heard today throughout any of the presentations that you've been in about the types of differences the partnerships have made with other UW system institutions in the community, in health, in nursing, in business, in nonprofits, across the board, in the education sector, name it. Public health, the work that is being conducted, not just in the Zilber School of Public Health, not just in the College of Nursing, not just in the College of Health Sciences, but under the auspices of a future to be developed UWM for Health, how every school and college can participate in that. Huge impact in terms of the community, the types of participants that we have on and off campus. Education. And let me just give you a tidbit of an example. Dean Barbara Daly tells me that we have 1,100 student teachers. I would like to say today, but it's summer, so we don't quite have it today. But 3 weeks ago, I could say today we have 1,100 student teachers in 32 school districts in 90 different schools in southeastern Wisconsin that are doing student teaching. Across the board, public, private, charter, voucher, we're all over this. And this is really important for us to have that impact. Quality of life, I think you can all appreciate that. Income levels, workforce development, and talent retention. UW-Milwaukee has not yet begun to realize the potential that it can have in this community. That sets up, I think, a nice segue for me to introduce, again, President of Metro Milwaukee Association of Commerce, my good friend, longtime colleague, Tim Sheehy. Please join me in welcoming Tim.
Appreciate it. Nice job. I have no PowerPoint slides, and I'm only going to take a couple minutes, but it's a privilege to be here and a pleasure to be here at Mark's request. Last time I spoke to the Board of Regents was about a decade ago, and I'll have to admit to being very nervous about it because it was in Van Nuys Hall, and I had a sinking feeling as I walked in there, because it was the first time I was in there since I was a student, that I hadn't done my homework and Professor Nantel was going to call on me. So neither of which happened, obviously, but a pleasure to be here today. What I want to do just briefly with the time I have is to burrow into just one key way in which UWM really impacts the community, and in my particular case, economic development in Milwaukee. This is not going to be a new statement to you because you all recognize this, but our members, the companies in the southeastern Wisconsin that employ over 300,000 people, the only constant in their life is change. We are competing as a community in a global economy, and they're competing every day in their businesses in a global economy. There was a recent article in the Economist that identified that 47% of all the categories that jobs are put in are at risk of automation. Think about that. Almost half the job categories we have today are at risk of automation. And in particular, what that means for Milwaukee's economy, where manufacturing is our fastball, is that we've seen the high-end manufacturing jobs grow. We've seen the low-end manufacturing jobs grow, but we've seen an incredible hollowing out of the craft jobs in our economy. So what that says to me is that we're engaged with UWM and other higher educational institutions in a race against technology. And as Wayne Gretzky used to love to say, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going to be. Well, we need UWM to help us figure out where that puck is going to be, or we're not going to do a very good job of skating to it. And the way that I see UWM playing a critical role in this community, quite frankly, is in talent development. That is the key differentiator for our members and the key differentiator for this community, is our ability to develop talent. And when I think about UWM in my conversations with Mark and past chancellors, UWM grads stay in this region in significant numbers, and that's really important to us. UWM's research and graduate offerings raise and enhance the talent base that we have, and in a sense they fuel lifelong learners, which for the business community, those are our most valuable players, those lifelong learners. And then thirdly, and just as importantly, and I think of Superintendent Evers as I make this comment, UWM provides a door for college attainment for the state's most diverse and fastest growing population, many of whom are first-generation college attendees. We need, as a community, to do a better job to prepare these young people to come to this institution, but that is a vital role that UWM plays, not single-handedly in the state, but to a greater degree than any other university. So simply put, it's this investment of UWM in developing our talent that helps us drive growth and jobs. And that's what everybody wants today. Where are more jobs coming from? And so if you look at southeastern Wisconsin, we have about 1 million jobs in southeastern Wisconsin. 275,000 of those 1 million jobs are in what we call driver industries. These are companies and industries that export most of their goods or services out of the region. They don't have a local customer base. They're here because this is a great place to do business on a global basis. And that is critical because those 275,000 jobs in those driver industries create another 325,000 jobs in companies primarily engaged in supplying them with goods or services. If you do the math, those 600,000 jobs create the other 400,000 jobs, the quality of life jobs that we have here. Where do I get a haircut? Where do I go to eat? Who educates my kids? So it's critically important that UWM remains a strong partner in developing the talent, because that talent is what's going to drive our economic success. And why is this so important? As Mitch Fromstein, who founded Manpower, famously said, it takes 18 years to create an 18-year-old. And when we look ahead from today to the year 2020, and we ask the question, what's our workforce going to look like? This is the answer we get. I'll use a very generous definition of workforce age, from 15 to 69. By the year 2020, in southeastern Wisconsin, there are only going to be 13,000 more people in the age group of 15 to 69. When I look at the retirements that are coming and just modest economic growth, we're going to have 63,000 more jobs by 2020. You and I know that math will not work. The only way that math is going to work is if we're producing, developing, and attracting the kind of talent that's going to fill those jobs, or they're going to get created somewhere else. So in conclusion, the bottom line goal that we have as a community, and that UWM is a key part of, is to make this region stickier, right? We want to make this a really sticky region for growing, developing, and recruiting talent. So UWM has to be at the forefront of this. They have to be nimble, they have to be focused, and they have to be a resource that's going to meet our needs. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the opportunity. And just to go off script a second, a couple closing remarks. I am passionate about the role that UWM has played, and it's been a leadership role in chartering some of the best value-added schools in the city of Milwaukee. And I hope the university and the Board of Regents will keep UWM in that game. That's clearly critical. We're grateful that you put Mark in this leadership role. He's going to do a very good job at it. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't note that if the right fruit that we want off the tree is talent, then we got to water the tree. We got to make sure that we fund the great faculty that we have here, we can attract and retain great faculty, and that we continue to attract the research dollars that are going to help us all look around the corner. So again, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Hard to follow that. Thanks, Tim. Very nice job. In conclusion, let me wrap up with two different perspectives. One are a few conclusions and then a final video that I think does help demonstrate the value, the impact, and the types of activities that we have. I would like to say one of the key examples that we have is when we had a recent primary employer that had the options to go anywhere it wanted. And I'm going to be very careful with the name and things like that. You might figure out who I'm talking about. But one of our primary employers was courted nationally, and they said we have 2,000 Milwaukee employees in our corporate headquarters, and 600 of those are UWM graduates. This is the workforce that we can build on. This is why we're going to put in the biggest tower in the state to really make a big difference here. So that's just a testament, Tim, to I think the types of things you're talking about. Our future path, as I have in the slide here, the future path forward is very clear. What we've got to do, what's in front of us. There's not a lot of debate, I think, about some of these things. We are at the right place. This is the right time. The growth areas for the greatness are absolutely seeded. We do need to have the continuing commitment. We need to have the faith that this institution can deliver on its promise, on its potential, but we need your help. There's no question about it. We need to accelerate the impact. The region, as I started out, in terms of the challenges facing this region, this state and beyond, leave no debate for the importance of what we can do. I do think that the issues around leadership focus and momentum are key. President Cross, we talked last night about the importance of focusing on metrics and really being able to deliver to zero in on some of those things. That, I stand before you to say, I'm absolutely committed to help bring all the great talent that we have on this university forward in that way. So let's finish off with something that I think does a nice job synthesizing one final video, and we'll call it good in terms of what UW-Milwaukee has been doing, some of the neat areas. This is a video that I think you might find to be very, very powerful.
Okay, can you just slide your hand through there? Okay. Perfect. Can you grab my hand with it or not? Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Do it one more time. Ah, cool. That's it. I've got to do something because this is, I can help. So you want to try it out? Yeah. Okay.
I saw all those videos of kids picking up stuff, and I thought it'd be cool.
That's good. I tell all of my students that we can change the world. We can do something important. We can do something impactful. And they come in and they're just ready to jump in and try something new. And
Shay and her class have come and visited our class, and we get to talk to her and interact with her, and it's really cool to see her put on the hands that we've designed and use them and really react to that.
What I really want to do is to streamline everything and make it so it's actually the same size as her other hand. So it feels like it fits as a functional part of her body.
I knew that they would come up with better ideas than I could come up with, because that's what our young people and our students do here at UWM. They come up with ideas that are grand, and that brings a richness to the project that I can't. I'm too old in some ways to do that, to have a fresh perspective.
none of the students have ever 3D printed. None. And so that entire production process is different. None of them have ever used a foam cutter. So it's a really fun thing to see them all out of their element, but willing to work together and help each other.
There's a Google Plus community called Enable, and Enable is a group of right now about 400 members. So I can talk to people from around the world. I can download the files for it.
We had our students join Enable, and almost immediately people who I would be intimidated to talk to at first
would chime in on their sketches and their ideas. And the students, you could just see they came in and they were proud of the fact that they were part of this. And I think that that's really empowering.
I think that just that rapid pace at which we can develop and research, it's wonderful, it's marvelous.
Pull them out, stick them on the finger that you want them.
I don't think there's a lot of other kids out there who can say that they get to be a part of making their own hand and give feedback and can have choices. Just seeing her joy. As a mom, that's all you want, is your kids to be happy.
Have you ever seen the laser cutter work? It's pretty fun.
They're the ones that can sit here and spend hours and hours and hours away from their family working on stuff. And it's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So leaves us speechless.
That's your child? Are you okay? It's okay? Okay.
Yes, Frankie and I are giving them these hands and, sort of we're gifting them with our work. But I think in a real way, they are giving us the bigger gift. This is the type of opportunity that lets you re-fall in love with a discipline. Would that be cool? Put little charms in there.
There's so much more we can do. There's so many more problems to solve. Being here and being able to engage with our students to do that, that's the greatest job in the world,
Life-changing, transformational. Thank you for allowing us to share the UW-Milwaukee story as we move forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark and Tim. Are there any comments or questions? No. Thank you very much. As promised, the major topic of our meeting this month is the UW budget. President Cross will start us off by providing an overall introduction of the 2014-15 annual budget as well as the 2015-17 biennial budget. Ray?
Thank you, President Felbo. It's kind of hard to follow a girl that has a new hand, isn't it? It's wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. My remarks today are meant to frame and focus us on three key aspects of the many issues embedded in the topics today. The annual budget, we're going to talk some of them about that. The biennial budget, and student financial aid. Much of my presentation relates directly to the first of these three, the annual budget. It is here where you will see perhaps the most significant internal organizational changes since the creation of the UW system. The ongoing reform of our financial management systems. We are developing and have begun using new tools and new ways to analyze and manage our finances. The proposed annual budget we will present in a few moments was built using some of them. One of the most noteworthy reforms is the disaggregation of our finances. In this proposed annual budget, you will see the budget broken down by fund and by institution. Before the October board meeting, you will also see each institution's fund balances broken down by Legislative Audit Bureau category. That report, the level of commitment report, will require that each institution consistently, and I repeat, consistently, apply the LAB categories to their fund balances. We plan on designating a project manager, creating a review panel to make sure we are diligent in our efforts to systematically and
consistently apply this process to our respective fund balances. I know Regent President Felbo and Regent Whitburn and other members of the board feel strongly about this. We do too. The proposed annual budget will provide new perspectives on finances and different approaches to the way we look at and present our financial data. I also want to recognize Interim Vice President Steve Wildeck, Associate Vice President Frida Harris, Associate Vice President Julie Gordon, and the campus CBOs, and a number of individuals who've worked so hard to bring us this far. They deserve a special thank you. Would you just pause for a minute and give them a hand? They've worked really hard at this. Our ultimate goal is to be able to forecast financial conditions 3 biennia, or 6 years, into the future. That will be an incredible step forward. Sometimes we have difficulty forecasting next week. Well, that was meant to be a joke. It will provide for better financial and policy program decisions for each campus and for the entire system. But let's deal with the matter at hand. I want to highlight several important points in the proposed annual budget. Please, as Steve presents them, look for these key points. First, we are seeking your approval of a $6.097 billion expenditure budget. We are also seeking your approval to spend an additional estimated $160 million from our fund balances. I want to emphasize, approval to spend fund balances has never before been requested of the board. Secondly, there have been significant strategic reductions in our fund balances, even since we last met. Our fund balances have dropped from $1.097 billion last June to $917 million projected by the end of this month. That's a 16.5% reduction over the last year. Further, they are projected to drop to $804 million by June of next year. That will represent a 27% drop since June of 2013. When obligated, planned, and designated commitments are removed from the $804 million, less than $200 million will be true reserves. I want to repeat that. Less than $200 million will be true reserves. That's just 3.3% of our overall budget that is set aside for contingencies and emergencies. Yes, that does concern me. Let me be clear. These reductions were both strategic and necessary. However, prudent business practices require adequate reserves to address the volatility of an organization's finances. I am committed to working with the board and with campus leadership to find that appropriate sweet spot, that appropriate balance. Thirdly, it is important to note that the tuition portion of the fund balances is projected to drop significantly, from $551 million last June to $304 million by June of next year. That represents a 45% reduction in that account within that fund over a 2-year period. Finally, I'm also pleased to note that within that fund, the system-wide account balance is projected to be down from $151 million in June of last year to about $60 million this June. I promised the board, the governor, the legislature, and the chancellors it would be cut in half by this June and it will be. Some of the added benefits of the changes we are making include a greater emphasis on the budgeting and planning process, improved accuracy in budgeting, and a better understanding of our fiscal positions, both institutionally and as a system. So let me summarize some of these key points. First, the documents before you that you will see today look significantly different than the previous annual budget documents. There is considerably more information, and future budget documents will be even more informational and hopefully useful. Second, our overall fund balances, our tuition balances, and our system-wide account fund balances are down significantly. Third, we are still reforming our practices, but have fundamentally shifted the way we manage our financial resources. Key point. We hope this effort will give you, our board, our students, our faculty, our staff, the governor, the legislators, and all taxpayers a better understanding of exactly where we are financially. These efforts will also allow us to better align our resources with our strategic goals and mission. That is clearly important. Speaking of strategic goals and the alignment of resources within those goals, let me introduce the things we are considering in the biennial budget request, which you'll hear shortly after the annual budget. The biennial budget request will officially come before you in August. Today, we're introducing you to some of the various elements we are exploring and have considered. We're attempting to develop the biennial budget around these 4 pillars. The first pillar is financial management and reporting reforms. You're already seeing some of that. I think everyone understands the importance of this effort, so I'm not going to repeat that. However, I will be interested in your feedback after this meeting, maybe in a few days, after you've reviewed our initial attempt to use and present some of this work, how you feel about it, what you think about it. The second pillar is affordability for Wisconsin students and their families. What does that mean? We use that word a lot. Well, we all know that student debt and the cost of higher education are 2 major concerns that appear in almost every newspaper around the country when you talk about higher education. We must be aggressive in our efforts to keep costs down and to reduce student debt. Therefore, our biennial budget request will, number 1, hold costs down for all students by proposing to continue the tuition freeze. Number 2, to help technical college students reduce their cost to complete a college degree by easing transfer through the 30-credit transfer agreement we will officially sign tomorrow afternoon. 3, help high school students reduce their cost of attending college by providing more dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment courses in their high schools under the new course options program. 4, to provide more financial aid to students through the Wisconsin Higher Education Grants Program. Currently, 1 out of 10 eligible applicants is turned away. We propose to change that. Freezing tuition, improving transfer capabilities, expanding dual enrollment opportunities, and increasing financial aid to Wisconsin students. That is what we mean when we say we hope to make college more affordable for Wisconsin students. The third priority or pillar within our request will focus on our faculty and staff, our university workforce needs. We are committing ourselves to developing sustainable compensation solutions so that the UW system can more effectively compete in the global higher education marketplace. We won't resolve this in 1 year, but we cannot wait another. This means that a multi-year plan will be needed to augment what we already have, what we've already done on some campuses to address compensation challenges. In addition, we need to secure the statutory flexibility to use the resources we already have. Finally, our fourth pillar will seek funds and support to more deeply engage the university in the serious challenges facing our state. We cannot address all of the state's challenges, but we can focus on some of the most important ones. Can the university help reduce the achievement gap of underrepresented minorities in our schools? Can the university help to create more jobs by helping Stage 2 companies grow? Can the university have an impact on the infant mortality rate in this community? Can we more effectively translate our research into commercial products? We can and we must. I believe the state that created, supports, values, and yes, even loves its university, the state that long ago conceived and embraced the idea we call the Wisconsin idea, the state that actually penned the university's mission statement into law. I know of no other state that's done that. And I quote from that mission statement directly, "In this broad mission, our methods of instruction, research, extended training, and public service designed to educate people and improve the human condition." What a powerful mission statement. I believe that state, the state of Wisconsin, expects and deserves nothing less from its university. Let us not just be known as the University of Wisconsin, but also as the University for Wisconsin. Thank you. Well, that's my overview of what you're going to see. You're going to see a lot of details now. Your challenge, your homework assignment, and you will be graded before you are allowed to exit this room, will be to identify those themes in what you hear. Now, Interim Vice President Steve Wildeck will walk us through the specifics of the proposed annual budget, and Senior Vice President David Miller will give us an overview of the kind of things we are exploring for the biennial budget request, and then present a proposal for the Wisconsin Higher Education Grant to be forwarded to the Wisconsin Higher Education AIDS Board program. Steve?
Thank you, President Cross, and good afternoon, Regents. When I was a kid, on Sunday mornings, we would go to church, of course, and whenever I saw the pastor walk up to the lectern with a book this thick, I knew we were in for a long sermon. In your folders, you have two handouts that go along with the annual budget presentation. One has the Resolution 7 on the front, and this is an excerpt from your annual budget document that's more lengthy, and we thought it would be handy for you to have this, as these are the tables that we will review in this presentation. The second handout is a handout of the slides that I will walk through. And this really has no practical purpose except for 30 minutes from now you may want to look at this when you're thinking, when in the world is he going to finish? You'll see how far into the slides we are. And if you have any questions that you want to flag on certain slides, this would be handy for that as well. The 2014-15 annual budget document in some ways looks familiar, and in some ways it looks very different from those in past years. As President Cross mentioned, the UW system is in the center of a major transition in its financial planning and management. In this transition, we're creating more transparency in our financial reporting. We're showing financial information by institution rather than in the aggregate. We're estimating revenues and expenditures more accurately. We're predicting balance levels. We're factoring those balance and actual financial information and performance into budget planning. And we're designing and implementing a 6-year financial planning framework to be applied to the major operational areas of our business. You can see some of those changes in the documents we're reviewing today, while others are yet to come. Over the next few minutes, we will walk through some of the budget material in detail, and we'll also talk about the fund source categories and highlight some of the key outcomes of the 14-15 annual budget. At this time, I'll ask you to turn to item 7, which is the resolution to approve the nearly $6.1 billion annual budget. The resolution you're being asked to approve today includes not only the operating budget, but also one-time investments being planned over the next year, which will draw down fund balances. As listed in the resolution, nearly $160 million in one-time use of program revenue balances is planned in 14-15. During this major transition year, some institutions were unable to pull all of these planned one-time expenditures into their official budget, but they are listed separately. Next year, this planned use of balances column on the right side of the resolution will go away, and all of the planned expenditures, both operational and one-time in nature, should be in the budgeted amount. As far as the fund source categories are concerned, the categories in the first column of the resolution align with the categories that we're now using in new reports that the board is now receiving on a periodic basis. So that will help you compare apples to apples as you view the different reports in the future. The Program Revenue Balance Report, the Financial Management Report, which is otherwise known as the Budget to Actual Report, and the Level of Commitment Report all will use these same categories. Before we move on, I do want to say a word about the table of contents. All of the information found in Section A is information that the board has never seen before when it approves an annual budget. It gives important financial information for each institution, and it contains a great deal of information about how these spending plans will affect fund balances. I hope you find that we're moving in the right direction with the annual budget document. Now let's walk through the numbers. Please turn to page 2 in the annual budget document, which is Table A1. Table A1 shows the 2013-14 budget, which is the current year, and the proposed 14-15 budget in the shaded columns. The 14-15 budget represents a 1.7% increase in planned spending, with all of that increase occurring in the operational fund source categories at the top of the chart of GPR tuition, auxiliary operations, and general program operations. We'll spend most of our time this afternoon on these 3 major fund sources. Also note, in the upper left-hand corner of the chart, that the estimated current year expenditures of $3.62 billion will exceed the current year budget of $3.37 billion by about $255 million, or 7.5%. This is largely due to the additional spending from fund balances due to Act 20 requirements and from the additional use of fund balances by our institutions. On the right side of Table A1, you see a focus on fund balances. Total balances in the first three fund sources are estimated to be $732 million at the end of the current fiscal year, and then decreasing by another 15.4% by June 30th of 2015, a year from now, under this budget plan. A primary goal of this budget document was to show the relationship between fund balances and budget plans. Also note that as of today, our current year-end estimate of all fund balances, other than those with external restrictions, is approximately $917 million. This is down over 16.5% from the $1.097 billion balance in these same funds at the end of last fiscal year. Now please turn to Table A2 on page 4. Table A2 shows the entire UW system budget by fund source for every UW institution, UW system administration, and system-wide accounts. This is the first time that the Board of Regents has reviewed information in this detail as part of the annual budget. GPR and tuition, which supports the general educational program for students, totals $2.5 billion, or 41.4% of the total system budget. The chart at the bottom of the page shows that GPR provides about 19% of the total budget, while tuition provides about 22%. Let's take a quick, closer look at these 6 different portions of the budget, one by one. Well, not so quick. We'll start with the budgetary fund source category of GPR and tuition. If you could, turn to Table A3 on page 5. We will spend more time on this fund source than any other today because of its importance to our overall budget. It's also the most complex. Funding in the GPR tuition category pays for things like instruction, libraries, buildings and grounds maintenance, academic and administrative technology, student services, debt service on academic facilities, utilities, and institutional administration. So in many ways, this category is the heart and soul of our university's funding. On the left side of Table A3, you'll notice the GPR and tuition amounts for each institution, system administration, and system-wide programs. The 2013-14 budgeted amounts are shown, along with the proposed 14-15 amounts. And as you can see at the bottom, our overall GPR tuition budget increases 2.3%, or $57 million under this plan. About half of the $57 million increase comes in the form of additional GPR to support costs to continue. The rest of the increase comes from some institutions which are increasing their budgets voluntarily because they're planning for higher levels of tuition revenue in the coming year. We'll discuss these variations between the two budget years in more detail in a few minutes. The center of this table, you'll find information about how the proposed GPR tuition budget will affect our tuition fund balances. We heard the board loud and clear last year. You want to see fund balance information at the time you approve an annual budget. Notice that a year ago, on July 1st of 2013, we had a total of $551 million in tuition fund balances across the system. Our institutions estimate that we will end the current fiscal year at the end of this month with a $381 million tuition fund balance. That's a 30% reduction in the current year. Much of this tuition fund balance reduction across the system is due to Act 20 transfers, base cuts, and balance reduction, and self-funding requirements. Under the 14-15 budget plan in the upcoming year, our institutions estimate that we will end next year with a $304 million tuition fund balance. That is only an estimate, of course. So under this budget plan, tuition fund balances are estimated to decrease another 20%. Our goal with this fund balance is not to drive it to zero, but to manage these institutional balances within the parameters of our new program revenue balances policy. And speaking of the new PR balances policy, if our July 1st, 2014 beginning balance estimates are accurate in this category, all but 3 of our institutions would be over the 12% threshold and would be filing a report with the board in October to justify those balances. Last year, particular attention was placed on the fund balance in system-wide. That's the orange line near the bottom of the chart on the screen. A year ago, that balance was $151 million, and it is expected to decline 60% to $61 million by the end of this month. We expect the balance in system-wide to hold steady throughout the next year. Most of the Act 20 funding requirements came from system-wide balances for things like the transfer to the Higher Education AIDS Board and the Economic Development Incentive Grant Program. Additional projects, such as the building of the new UW network, are also being funded through system-wide balances. The planned use of balances column, closer to the right, represents one-time plans to spend down balances in 14-15 that were not able to be placed into the official budget this year due to timing. A year from now, we're planning to incorporate the one-time spending into the official budget along with operational expenditures. So this column should be transitional in nature and should go away next year. The cash flow from operations column is one that I would like to talk about for a couple of minutes. UW institutions have historically operated on a governmental budgeting model that focuses on spending allocations. The emphasis in budget planning has been on the expense side of the ledger. However, the university is a dynamic enterprise that is driven by revenues. Therefore, a major part of our financial transition over the next year is to move our major fund source operations to both a revenue and expense budgeting format. The cash flow from operations column, which is brand new, illustrates the beginning of that change. Where you see a positive cash flow number, it means that the institution is planning that its revenues will exceed its expenses in 14-15. When we come before you next year for the 15-16 annual budget, this portion of the chart should be rather simple, with an estimated starting balance, adding revenues, subtracting expenses, which would result in an estimated ending balance. It's important to note that the estimated ending balance on June 30th of 2015, at the end of next year, is largely encumbered. In the far right column, for your information only, you see the amount of one-time commitments that institutions report beyond the 14-15 year. In other words, even though we estimate a year-ending tuition balance next year of $304 million, there are $190 million of obligated, planned, or designated commitments against that ending balance and future ending balances. The format that you see here in Table A3 is repeated for the major fund sources of auxiliary operations, general program operation, and general program operations. It provides all new information that has not been presented to the board in the past, and it's designed to give you a clear estimate of the budget plan's impact on fund balances. Before we move away from Table A3, let's go back to the left side of the table, which shows this year's GPR tuition budget and the proposed 14-15 budget for the same fund source. As I said earlier, our overall GPR tuition budget increases 2.3%, or $57 million under this plan. And I said that some of the increase comes in the form of additional GPR to support costs to continue, and that the rest of the $57 million comes from some institutions which are changing their budgets voluntarily because of changes in predicted levels of tuition revenue. Before we move on to the other summary tables for auxiliaries and general program operations, let's take a closer look at the changes between these two columns for 13-14 and 14-15. Please turn to Table B1, which is on the last page, page 11 of the handout from your folders. And in the shaded columns on the left and the right, you'll see the GPR tuition budget for the current year, which is taken from the previous table, and the GPR tuition budget that is proposed for 14-15 on the right. And the columns in between show you the pluses and minuses, or what I like to call the puts and takes, between each institution's 13-14 budget and their 14-15 GPR tuition budget. And we'll quickly walk through this table. The tuition targets and differential tuition column shows any voluntary changes that institutions have requested in their budgeted tuition revenue level for 14-15. Overall, institutions increased their revenue budgets by $30 million, or 2%, mainly because of enrollment and program changes. None of these changes in tuition revenue budgets are resulting from tuition rate increases, because tuition rates did not go up due to the tuition freeze this year, or for next year. The changes in the rest of the columns on this table follow agreed upon approaches for how funding will be distributed to follow costs. An institution is neither advantaged nor disadvantaged relative to others by following the approach that I'm about to walk through for the rest of the columns. The compensation and fringe benefit adjustments column is closely related to the column 3 over, labeled unfunded pay plan costs. The lesson for next year is we'll put these two side by side. The first column, compensation and fringe benefit adjustments, shows that the UW system is allocating $26.1 million at the bottom of that column to institutions to cover compensation-related costs of the 1% state-approved pay plan in the 13-15 biennial budget. The costs include salaries and fringe benefits, as well as general cost increases on health insurance. Of the $26.1 million cost, which is an unavoidable cost, we have to support the pay plan, $17.5 million of that amount is provided by new state GPR. The remaining $8.6 million would have ordinarily been generated through a tuition increase. But because tuition is frozen, that $8.6 million must be found somewhere else. In the unfunded pay plan costs column, it is being reallocated from institutions to support the unavoidable compensation cost increases. In other words, the $8.6 million is being taken from the right pocket so it can be added to the left pocket. The financial aid column is a redistribution of GPR that is provided for Lawton grants and the Advanced Opportunity Program grants. Even though overall financial aid funding is flat for these programs, UW reallocates the funds according to student financial need. The utilities and debt service column reflect nearly $9.3 million in additional GPR, all of which is for increase in GPR-supported debt service. Utilities funding overall remains flat next year. The state provides the debt service amount for academic buildings and later takes it away to make the actual debt service payments. The UW has no control over the actual amount and has no control over debt financing rates. The column labeled Other includes some minor reallocations within the system, which are footnoted at the bottom. And all of these puts and takes on Table B1 result in an increase to the GPR tuition budget of $56.8 million for 14-15. Now let's go back to the fund source summary for auxiliary operations. Yes.
Sticking with that table before we move on, B1, the GPR/tuition dollars are made up of general purpose revenue and tuition.
Correct.
The columns that you've got are only the financial aid column shows a reallocation of GPR dollars. So what the assumption is that each campus is going to receive essentially the same proportion of GPR dollars in 2014-15 that it received in 2013-14, with the exception of the financial aid column change?
The existing base of each institution, budget of each institution, is not reformulated except for these changes listed in these columns. And in particular, the financial aid column is reshuffled every year according to each institution's overall student financial need for financial aid. And that's an agreed upon approach that has been in place for years. Does that answer your question, Regent Higgins?
It does. Okay. Ray, of course, points out that debt service also is GPR money. But you've already pointed out that that's outside of our control. So.
And that is placed in institutions' budgets according to the most recent history of that institution's debt service payments. And that is reshuffled a bit. But institutions do not feel the impact of any debt service changes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I do need to take this opportunity to credit Regent Higgins for putting us on a better path with our GPR tuition nomenclature. Thank you. The next fund source we'll look at is auxiliary operations. And so if you could go to Table A4 on page 6. Auxiliary operations is 11.5% of the total system budget. And it includes major functions such as student housing, food services, parking, intercollegiate athletics, student unions, and retail stores. This category also includes student segregated fees, which pay for student activities, clubs, and programs, and also student approved capital projects for unions and rec facilities. The 2014-15 budget plan increases auxiliary operations spending by 1.8%. Fund balances in auxiliaries are expected to rise this year by $222 million. Fund balances in auxiliaries are expected to rise to $222 million by July 1st of this year, before falling again throughout 14-15. Several institutions with rising balances this year report that unexpected delays in auxiliary-funded building projects is a significant contributor to the increase. If the July 1st, 2014 fund balance estimates are correct, 8 institutions would be subject to reporting balances over the 12% threshold in our program revenue balance policy, while 2 institutions would be reporting on negative balance levels. Cash flow from operations on auxiliaries is expected to be negative overall as institutions strategically look to fund balances for one-time investments and operational needs. Several institutions show $0 in the planned use of balances column because they have incorporated their one-time investments in their budget plans and are a step ahead in the transition to eliminate this column for next year. It's important to remember that while estimated balances are listed for each institution, there are multiple auxiliary units within these institutions, each which generate revenue, incur expenses, and manage their balances, all according to the institution's policies. So while an institution may appear to have an adequate fund balance in auxiliaries available to offset an increase in, say, room and board rates, much of that fund balance may be located in parking, textbook rental, or other operations and is needed to fund priorities in those areas. Segregated university fees are charges assessed to all students for student activities, programs, and facilities that support the university's mission. UW students are deeply involved in the review and approval of programs and facilities that can require long-term segregated fee commitment. The student's role in this segregated university fee process is described in state statute, Regent policy, and university administrative policies. Students have several roles as they pertain to segregated fees. They formulate allocable segregated fee rates and budgets, and allocable fees are mainly those for student organizations and clubs and activities. Students also review and consult on the setting of non-allocable fee budgets. And non-allocable fees involve long-term commitments, such as those for facilities and certain long-term programs like student health centers. Students are involved in discussions for major facilities projects to be funded by segregated university fees, and they are to take action on the proposal prior to it coming before the Board of Regents for approval. The UW system president, system administration staff, and chancellors are all responsible for making sure these policies and procedures are followed. So a word about auxiliary rates. The rate schedules for student segregated fees, room and board, and textbook rental programs are located in Section D in your annual budget document. The proposed segregated fee increases at our four-year institutions range from 0.6% to 7.5%, for an average of 3.7%. And segregated fee changes average 3% for UW colleges. Room and board rate changes range from minus 0.7% to 4.8% for four-year institutions for an average increase of 2.7%. Room and board rates include both housing and meal plan costs. Rates for UW colleges include only those 2 university-operated programs at UW Marathon County and UW Marinette. Textbook rental program rates average 2.5% under this plan. Several UW colleges campuses currently offer textbook rental, but those programs are being replaced by a contract which the board approved in February. And that contract is available to all campuses. Under the arrangement, students will have 5 different options to acquire textbooks, with one of them being rental. Let's talk briefly about the other tables in Section A. And we'll start with Table A5 on page 7. Table A5 represents the budget and balance summary for general program operations. And in this category, even though it's only 4% of the budget, we have a wide variety of activities that are revenue generating in nature, and they're closely linked to the academic mission of the university. Examples include remedial education programs, mission-related service units such as copy centers and dairy stores, and in this fund source are major system-wide cooperative services which are funded through chargebacks, and that includes the UW Service Center and the shared financial system operations. The proposed budget increase in this category is almost 17%. And while this may seem like a large spending increase, our estimated actual expenditures in this fund source this year from Table A1 are $246 million. This means that we under-budgeted significantly this year, and if that level of expenditure is continuing, we probably didn't do a great job estimating actual revenues and expenditures. Budgeted categories in the 14-15 plan are a much truer reflection of actual experience and more likely to be in line with actuals going forward. Note that the general program operations fund balances will decline over 9% under this budget plan, and again, several institutions have incorporated one-time uses into their budgets. Before we leave Table A5, this is another good place to mention our efforts to create a 6-year planning model for the 3 major fund source categories of GPR tuition, auxiliary operations, and general program operations. Our vision is to forecast revenues and expenditures, cash flow, and balances 6 years into the future, all influenced by factors including enrollments, program changes, facilities, and rates. Let's look briefly at budget information for the 3 remaining fund source categories of federal indirect cost reimbursement, gifts, grants, and contracts, and other sources. These tables are very brief and only contain budgeted spending amounts per institution. That's because they are not operational accounts per se, and the inflows and outflows for these remaining 3 fund sources do not follow a rhythm that we control. Past annual budget documents have never included budget detail on these 3 fund source categories. So let's quickly look at Table A6 on page 8. And Table A6 shows institutional budgets for federal indirect cost reimbursement funds. Federal indirects are 2.5% of our overall system budget, and they include revenue that we receive as part of federal grants to cover overhead expenses. Officially known as facilities and administration costs, or F&A, these costs are calculated in accordance with federal cost principles, and the F&A rate is negotiated periodically with federal government agencies. Back on Table A1, we saw that the estimated beginning year fund balance for federal indirects is $183 million. While that is a high balance when compared to our budget for next year, that balance can be influenced heavily by the timing of inflows and outflows from federal grants. It's also a fund source that is used by institutions often as a true reserve. Table A7 on page 9 shows the budgeted amounts for gifts, grants, and contracts, as well as the other fund source category. Almost all of these funds in these 2 categories come to us with external restrictions, and so there's no balance estimation or other operational information shown here. As you can see, while there are institutional variances in the budgets from the current year to 14-15, overall the UW system is expecting steady budget activity in these 2 fund sources. The gifts, grants, and contracts make up 20% of the overall budget. And this category includes federal and non-federal research grants, contracts, and expendable trust fund income. Gifts to university foundations are transferred to accounts in this category, in this fund source, just prior to their expenditure. 21% of the 14-15 budget is found in the other funds category. It mostly includes federal student aid programs such as Pell Grants, other grants, and direct student loans. This fund source also includes federal Smith-Lever funding for cooperative extension, and escrow for program revenue debt service, and state segregated funds for specialized programs, including the Wisconsin Bioenergy Initiative and the Rural Physician Residency Assistance Program. The rest of your annual budget document includes more background on the annual budget proposal, auxiliary rate changes, and tuition rates, which are not changing for the upcoming year. I appreciate your patience and attention while we took time to walk through the tables in section A and B. I hope you like the changes that you see as you get a better sense of the directions in which we're heading. Those directions include a heavier emphasis on budgeting revenues as well as expenditures, multi-year forecasting and modeling, and combining budget planning and fund balance management for a more holistic financial planning process. As a last note, I want to extend my thanks to Associate Vice President Frida Harris, Associate Vice President Julie Gordon, all their staff members in the offices of Budget and Planning and Financial Administration, our chief business officers at the institutions, and our financial professionals at our UW institutions for all of their hard work, their cooperation, and their commitment to this major transition. It's a major, an enormous transition in the way we do business. So in conclusion, let me refer you back to item 7 in your materials, which is the resolution to approve the 2014-15 annual budget of $6.097 billion, plus an estimated one-time use of balances of $159.9 million. Individuals from our institutions and system administration are available to answer any questions that you may have about the 2014-15 annual budget. And I'll ask Senior Vice President David Miller and Associate Vice President Frida Harris to join me as we take your questions. Thank you very much.
We know this budget's up 1.7% in fiscal 15 over fiscal 14. I would think all of our stakeholders would view it as a reasonable enhancement in spending in these economic circumstances. Secondly, I would like to commend the staff for what is a fundamentally far more transparent budget proposal than we've seen previously. This is helpful to Regents and helpful to all of our stakeholders. Third, Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the FY15 budget proposal, Resolution 7, as proposed.
Is there a second? Discussion. It was such a riveting presentation, as always. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Regent Whitburn's comments. I was dismayed last year when we were presented with the budget document that there was so little detail provided. And this is just a complete transformation. But I would caution, since I'm such a cautious person, that we can't rest on our laurels. There really is a lot of work that needs to continue to be done, especially as we look at some of the estimates out in future years. Some of those numbers have a lot of round numbers associated with them, and I know that will be refined in the months and indeed years ahead. But the transformation from last year to this year is significant, needs to be acknowledged, and certainly the staff, President Cross, need to be thanked. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about in the executive summary. under the overall spending plan increase of 1.7%. I think it's on, well, I know it's on page 1 or I or whatever it is. And it's the very last bullet point, noting that there is a $5 million decrease in other fund sources, including a reduction in anticipated Pell Grants. And I guess my question was, are we reducing our Pell Grants because the Fed is reducing the amount of allocable, or are we admitting fewer students who qualify for Pell Grants?
Part of it is that when we have had the decreases in enrollments, we are finding that there are fewer of our students who actually are qualifying for those. Another thing is that family incomes are tending to trend up right now. So the students who have some financial need, there's, again, fewer of those who qualify, and they qualify for smaller amounts. So we've been following that, and it's been kind of interesting to see what's happening in some of those areas. Okay.
And the tuition freeze, and correct me if I'm wrong, I reread it last night, covers everything. Covers non-resident, covers graduate school, the whole schmear, no tuition increase. And I guess I just want to go on record as saying I think we should be raising the non-resident tuition. It's hard to say this price tag is a bargain, and I certainly don't say it for our resident tuition compared to what it used to be and what it has so quickly changed into. But I think we are still a bargain. All of the quality education at all of our institutions, this one, Madison, and our comprehensive, other comprehensives, I think is a bargain for non-residents, and I wish they were paying more.
That point will not be forgotten, and there's some chancellors along that road that if we forget it, they won't let us. So and I'm sure that we've been trying to get more of a clarification on if we have any room on that, and we don't have room for this next year, but we're still going to be working on that for the biennial budget, the next biennial budget. Yes.
I'd like to add to that, Margaret, Regent Farrell. The other comment that I'd like about what we're seeing in front of us is this gives us a better understanding of our financials as we pass the budget. I've had an opportunity to pass a budget twice, and my feelings parallel those of Regent Mueller. But this also gives us another opportunity, which we haven't had before, and which ties into Regent Farrell's comment about taking a serious look at tuition, out-of-state tuition, but tuition in general. The format of this budget gives us an opportunity not only to look at our financials as they exist now, but to plan into the future. And that's a tool that we have not had before. And it's a tool that we can use not only in our own planning, but in communicating to legislators and communicating, more importantly, to the families and the students that attend our universities.
Thank you. I also want to make the point that so many people have been so involved in doing this, and I think we're all aware that this is still a work in process, and there will be more refinements coming in the upcoming years. And even in Regents, too, being informed of this, tried to walk through it before coming here. So I sometimes want to make that point about a number of things, because we get a presentation, we make a motion, in a second we have a couple comments, and we pass the budget. And I know how much work has gone into this by not only the staff and the leadership, but the regents also. So I want to thank you, and I specifically want to thank all you guys for this. This is a giant step as far as I'm concerned.
I keep ruining the valedictories, don't I? Sorry. On page, executive summary, page 4, beginning on a page before that, it starts talking about the GPR tuition changes, and then we get down to the new GPR resources are not provided as flexible funding, blah, blah, blah. And then it specifically says changes in funding for 2014-15 include, and then the last bullet point, it's just something I completely got lost in the verbiage here. $30,060,000 to re-estimate increases in academic tuition authority for existing differentials, self-supported programs, and credit outreach. Those are the programs that are essentially profit-making programs for our campuses? Is that what we're talking about? Or?
Those are largely self-supporting enrollments and programs that are the voluntary changes that I talked about in institutional tuition revenue expectations. And it's an increase, a $30 million increase collectively to institutional tuition budgets.
So, for instance, our friends at River Falls who have the Hudson Center are saying, you know, part of that $30 million is because we're going to get more people coming from the Twin Cities to take MBA courses with us or something.
If that's the plan and the expectation, then it would result in a higher level of anticipated tuition revenue, and the institution could opt to budget expenditures on that revenue.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Regent Higgins? Anything else?
No, Regent Fellow, but I do want to say thank you to David and Steve and Frida for being really clear about what's tuition and what's fees.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. President Cross provided some background on the biennial budget, and Senior Vice President Miller, along with Associate Vice President Rowe, will provide further information.
No, it's the same PowerPoint that you had for Steve. I'm continuing there. Thanks. I won't do anything. So, Steve, do you know what slide number you finished with? Steve, do you know what slide number you finished with? I was going to pick up right there. So we merged the PowerPoints so this wouldn't happen. So let me just begin with, we're switching gears completely now to the biennial budget request. So unlike an annual budget, which is detailed spending plans of revenue expenses, a biennial budget is actually a request for new money. It's a way to petition the state for new money for a 2-year period. Associate Vice President Alex Rowe for Capital Planning and Budget and I are going to give you a very quick, we realize the hour, President, and we are going to give you a very quick overview of what to expect to see at your very next meeting in the biennial budget request. I talked in February and March about the biennial budget being a year-long process that really begins with a whole lot of separate pieces that then come together in a nicely fitted puzzle at the end of the legislative session about a year from now. The board's role in this process is to request of the executive and legislative branches very specific pieces of that puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. The state provides the other pieces without direct petition from the board. So the statute requires that by September, the board make a request. You will meet in August to consider this request, and today, as part of the biennial budget request, in a moment, we will make a case for a financial aid request that goes through the Higher Educational Aids Board. a long timeline, as I mentioned. Today, we're way back to the left side of this in June, just beginning this year-long process. A major part of the budget, and always the largest dollar amount of funding that comes to the university in the biennial budget, is costs to continue. Those are costs just to maintain operations, so fixed cost increases, if you will. These are determined by the state. So in the biennial budget, you don't actually put in a request for a specific dollar amount. Rather, the resolution you'll see in August will authorize the President to negotiate with the Department of Administration in refining those amounts, and the Governor actually puts them in his budget when he sends that to the legislature. It includes debt service, fringe benefits, utilities, standard budget adjustments. What the board will request are any funding for new initiatives. This slide is to illustrate 4 new initiatives for funding that we are discussing and plan to discuss with you over the summer under President Cross's direction. The first of the 4, Economic Development Incentive Grants, is a familiar name. The current biennial budget initially included new funding for economic incentive grants. Then we were directed to pay for those out of one-time fund balances. And we have done that, overseen by the Ready Committee and Regent Higgins, and a whole grant process. We are anticipating asking for another round, if you will, although funded this time, of economic development incentive grants. Performance funding initiatives. Performance funding is a national phrase that you hear a lot about. It always means something different every place that it's instituted, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Regional Development Initiative ties back to President Cross's pillars. This and the Economic Development Incentive Grants are the engagement piece that President Cross talks so passionately about. This is the engagement piece of his pillars. Tuition share of 13-15 cost to continue. Okay. I'll talk in detail about that in a moment, but when we have a tuition freeze, the opportunity cost of that isn't merely the absence of new funding, but state formulas require that part of the cost to continue, fixed budget increases, have an embedded share from tuition. So if you freeze tuition and you don't get the tuition to pay the tuition share of fixed costs, then you have to reallocate for that. We would like to talk with you about petitioning the state to restore some of that rather than continuing to eat that out of base reallocation. So taking each one of those in turn, very briefly, the Economic Development Incentive Grants, I mentioned what the 13-15 funding was $11.5 million in each year. One potential request is to ask for that in one-time funding in the first year of the biennium. Performance funding elements include funding for targeted performance measures. In that model, an institution sets goals that are clearly defined, establish metrics to measure those goals, assess performance, and then repeat if it's successful. Performance funding is a great way to allow an institution, particularly one as large as this, to experiment. And then you seek continued funding for the things that work. You discontinue the things that don't work. The Regional Development Initiative, President Cross has already addressed that in his engagement piece, but it is addressing, it's the expansion of the Wisconsin idea, the use of the Wisconsin idea, engaging the university in the greatest challenges facing the state. This tuition share of cost to continue included compensation costs. So when the state decides to provide a 1% pay plan to state employees, what that means for the university is that taxpayers will pay 69% of that 1%, and tuition is supposed to pay 31% of that 1%. Well, we didn't get the tuition for that 31% of 1%, so institutions have to pay that out of their annual operating budget. Sorry. That was the $8.6 million in FY15 that Steve talked about in this annual budget. In addition, the biennial budget includes statutory language changes, and this is where we will seek to add the word merit. It seems like a small phrase, it's one word added to the statutes, but right now institutions can provide reallocation for compensation for employees in very limited circumstances, such as salary and equity adjustments, reclassifications, or competitive factors, but they can't really impact retention by reallocating compensation to those students, to those faculty members who are deserving of a merit increase. If you're all the way down the road toward a competitive factor adjustment, most cases that's not a successful effort. The faculty members already looked and gone. This is a way to address retention through awarding merit. We would also like to talk about enhanced contracting and purchasing authority, perhaps more delegated authority for capital projects, and updating some reporting requirements. What I mean by updating is eliminating a lot that may or may not be widely used. That's the biennial budget request overview. We'll be talking with you over the summer about specifics and have a formal request at the August meeting. And now Alex will provide a similar overview of the capital budget. Alex? Oh, now that's the new PowerPoint. Thank you, Rick. Let me take my stuff off of there.
We house, teach, play, undertake research and exploration in over 58 million square feet, of which more than 65% is 35 years or older. So I'm going to come back to that at the end, just so you have some sense of what we own. Capital budgeting process, just like the operating budgets, is a pretty lengthy process, except that we add another year, and it takes us usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 56 months to do a major capital project. So when you undertake capital improvements, it's a lengthy process. We hope to bring back to you in August the capital budget request, finish documentation, and then obtain approval next year and start projects. A very big change occurred for us this year, January 1st. The state of Wisconsin issued out multiple bid packages and signed contracts with all those contractors. They changed the law January 1st to a single prime process. However, this has been a more involved process, I think, than anyone anticipated, certainly for contractors, certainly for our institutions and the DOA. And it has caused, in some cases, several of our projects that were calendar dependent to be held back for a year, which is unfortunately contributing to some of our balances. Some trends that we're seeing that we'll see when you come through and that we've seen for a few biennium, we still continue to have inadequate science facilities. We need to renovate, upgrade, demolish, expand, or replace, both for teaching and research. We continue to invest in our learning environments. We need to right-size them. They need the right kind of lighting. They need the right kind of AV. They need to be the right platforms for our educators. A new endeavor for us that we hadn't seen a lot of is the notion that we would have faculty and student collaboration in research spaces. If we want our students to go out into the world and be successful right after college or to go to graduate study, these spaces are increasingly important for that. Continue to see residence hall renovations. When I went to college, I just had, probably a refrigerator, laptops, iPads, smartphones, hair straighteners. The amount of electricity and data that your average student needs today is very different than it was when I went to school. We have 42,000 students living in residence halls. We have 4 kinds of fund sources. GFSB, which we affectionately refer to, that is our general program revenue. We have program revenue, both borrowing and cash, and then obviously donor gifts, grants, and federal funding. This is sort of a GFSB overview, but just to give you a sense, over a 15-year historical perspective, we've had as little as $255 million and as much as $510. Our major capital projects are those projects that have to be individually enumerated. They cost $3 million or more and require, if you only want to add 500 square feet or more, you must have it enumerated. It's a magic number. So our latest example would be Eau Claire's new Centennial Hall that just opened up this last end of the year. The next category is all agencies. These are projects that are pretty much between up to about $3 million for renovation of facilities, could be HVAC, and up to $5 million for utilities. And they do, water penetration, exterior envelope, pipe. That's a physical plant director's nightmare right there. The next category is classroom IT. That's been a very successful program. Over the last 9 biennium, we have upgraded more than 600 learning spaces. This year, we added laboratories to it, and we anticipate, if it's approved tomorrow, expending up to about $14 million there. And you can see it could be as simple as just going from a more static learning environment to an active learning environment, improvements across our institutions. Last but not least are smalls, and these are projects that are between $0 and $187,000. They tend to go very quickly. Small renovations, these are motor projects, fan upgrades, as you can see, window sills. Here we have a little bleacher challenge, staircases. Trends. So what you're going to see coming forward, and I'm doing this in 6-year increments because we, as a board, we are going to ask you to approve a biennial budget and a 6-year plan as mandated by statute. So in 09 and 11, you see pretty much it was a priority in academic space, some utilities, administration, that was an acquisition of a building for Madison, and housing and dining. As we move on to the next biennium, you can see an increase continue in academics. Now we see a change where we have more athletic expenditures, a little less housing. And in the last biennium, again, a continued emphasis on academic renovation and a switch back to more housing. Currently planned requests that we are evaluating, continuing that trend, more academic space, an uptick here in athletics. For non-GFSB, we have received requests for these. These are the figures that we've received for this biennial budget. It is not unusual for us not to receive large numbers in the second 2 biennial. Institutions have master plans going on. They're doing feasibility studies. They're still assessing, based on what projects they might have going on now, where they want to be, what can they afford, what are their strategic priorities. So it isn't, I wouldn't say to you that in 17-19 that number might look like that. It might go up, it might go down, but these are estimates at that time. For GPR, we are, as we mentioned in February, we are anticipating a 5% increase over last time's funding. So you can imagine that's making our life a little bit challenging because we received somewhere in the neighborhood of $480 million requests just for the $368 million available in major capital projects. And what that does to us is it begins to see a deferral in projects. And in the first year of the biennium, $167 million. In the second year, $365. This is not adjusted for inflation or schedule. And by the third year, $610 million deferred. So I'm going to end with scale. In 13-15, 2.26 of our overall square footage was renovated through the approval of that budget, and 3.6 was added. We are anticipating that in this current parameter, we'll renovate only 3.37 of our overall square footage, and we will add maybe 1.95.
Any questions about the capital budget, Regent, or the biennial budget, Regent Whitburn?
As the staff knows, my view is we have been less than adequately transparent on an ongoing basis with regard to building and growing debt service obligations. So as we propose for capital projects in the upcoming biennium, I would hope that we would illustrate the debt service implications and perhaps net it out against our current obligations. We take on new debt and we retire old debt, and so are we going to add, and then what's the trend line so we can see the trajectory? Regents will recall the previous time that we addressed this subject, we are obligated in university-related bonding through 2042. Now this will be another 2 years on top of that unless we retire debt earlier. Very complicated issue because, of course, sometimes administrations delay or refinance. But I think eyes wide open to a greater extent is helpful and prudent.
Thank you, Regent Whitburn, and we certainly can. And of course, the budget you just adopted specified that there was a $9.3 million GPR increase in the GPR debt service. That budget you just adopted included about a $1.8 million increase in program revenue debt service. We will do a projection for when we bring the biennial budget to you on debt. It'll be a projection, but yes, we will. Thank you, Regent.
Okay.
Questions?
Any more questions? Okay. Next, we'll discuss the board's recommendation to the Higher Education Aids Board regarding financial aid for 2015-2017. We'll turn to Senior Vice President Miller for an overview.
Thank you. This is an action item, your last resolution for today. The board's role in requesting state-funded financial aid primarily is asking the Wisconsin Higher Educational Aids Board for that to submit a request on behalf of UW students in their budget request. The Higher Educational Aids Board also requests state funding for private school students who receive financial aid and Wisconsin Technical College students as well. The Wisconsin Higher Education Grant, UW, or WEG, is the largest financial aid program UW students receive in state funding. There are smaller grants embedded in the UW operating budget for Lawton and Advanced Opportunity grants, but much smaller amounts. This provides grants to undergraduate residents to meet financial need who are enrolled at least half-time. This is a complex graph, so I will take just a moment to walk through it. The left side numbers are measuring in millions of dollars. The blue bar chart, the blue bars, are the level of total state funding by year for the WEG grant from 07 to FY15. So as you can see, since 2011, the grant has been flat funded. However, it didn't receive a funding increase, but it also did not receive any cuts either through the downturn, and I think that's important. It's easy to focus on, well, it hasn't increased, but it also didn't go through the cuts that other state agencies have, that the university operating budget has, and so forth. It's been maintained. It's been increased once since 2009. So the impact of that, we'll look at another slide. And then the red line, as measured by the numbers and those are whole numbers, the thousands of dollars on your right side of the graph, is the average award per student of that. So it peaked in 2010 at $2,161. Due to the increase, let me go to the next slide, same number of years, this is now measuring the number of WEG eligible students. So the left numbers are thousands of students, the right numbers are thousands of dollars per grant. So the bars total the number of WEG eligible students, and then the bar is divided in the blue are those that actually received a grant among those who were eligible, and the red are those who were waitlisted. Okay. Any questions about that graph so far? I know there's a lot going on there, but it's efficiency. I'm using fewer graphs to show the same thing. And then it's the same red line that shows the trajectory, the historic trajectory of the average award. So it peaked in 2010 at $2,161 and has gone down ever since. So what actually happened here is the awards were reduced to cover more students as the number of eligible students went up. So that's why the average award is going down. So rather than, and even with that adjustment, the wait list increased drastically. This reflects the economic condition that began in 2008, of course. The number of awards in the past 4 years went up about 6,000. And then our proposal is going to be how to address this condition. How does this affect student loans? This graph shows that of those receiving WEG awards, 78.4 still have to borrow. So the WEG only funds part of the total cost of education. If the average award peaked at $2,161, is now $1,776. That's just attaching part of the funding need. The other is often met by loans. Of those waitlisted, 82% borrow funding. So increasing WEG directly reduces borrowing and therefore total student debt upon graduation. So this is the proposal. Yes, Regent Farrow.
Do only Wisconsin residents, are they the only ones that are eligible for WEG grants?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't give them to any of the non-residents who come here?
Not this grant, correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This is the proposal before you today in the resolution to request that HEAB, the Higher Educational Aids Board, make a request of the state on your behalf that totals 14.99, let's say 15 million, over the coming biennium, the 15-17 biennium. That breaks down in increasing the $58.3 million base by $6.3 million for an FY 15-16 budget of $64.7 million. What would that one-year increase do? It would eliminate the known waiting list at the current average award. So that's what you buy for $6.4 million in that fiscal year. Keep the average award about the same, should eliminate approximately, because we don't know what the waiting list will be, we only can know what it is today, should eliminate the waiting list. Then add to that, in the next fiscal year, $2.2 million to increase the average award to about $1,837. Where are those numbers coming from? $1,837 was the average award in fiscal year 12-13. And as I mentioned, the average award right now is $1,776. Why this recommendation? In March, we talked with you about a whole range of options, and you could have countless options. As I mentioned, what this one would do, what else did we look at? One could propose eliminating the waiting list, but not trying to make growth in the actual average award. That would have been about $12.8 million for the biennium. To bookend this, if one wanted to attack both the waiting list and get the average award back up to the peak fiscal year 10 level of 2161, that would be about $41 million over the biennium. We've taken, in making this request, a measured approach. The reality that funding has been flat for 5 years. We need to make progress in this area. We want to be rational, prudent, and yet responsible to the students in seeking additional financial aid, but in a realistically fundable and responsible manner. And that is how we come to the request before you today. Any questions?
Yes, Jim.
By the number of students who are full-time versus part-time, because part-time students are eligible but would presumably receive a lower award.
It is based on the financial need, less family contribution and other funds. So, students are eligible that are half-time or more, but the average award would be influenced by full-time versus part-time. What do you think? I mean, I don't know that it changes it very much, though.
Yeah, I don't believe that is the major contributor to it. One of the major contributors that we have, and I'm looking at Bob and Cody in the back because they're the ones who work on this area the most, is the fact that we have been decreasing the maximum level of awards that we would give out in order to make sure that we're providing them to more people. So that is a big driver of what is influencing that number. We wanted to get more people getting financial aid at a level that ensures that they can afford to attend the university.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? To approve Resolution 9. Mark, second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I will call upon Vice President Milner to present the resolution to move into closed session. Before I do, in case somebody got ill in the back of the room, and we think they're fine, so everybody knows that. I think an ambulance came to pick her up, but she did walk on her own to the next room.
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session pursuant to number 1, consider an amended compensation agreement for UW-Madison head basketball coach as permitted by Section 19.85 sub 1 sub C and E Wisconsin Stats. Number 2, review the appointment and consider the salary of UW-Oshkosh interim chancellor as permitted by Section 19.85 sub 1 F. Consider a student request for a review of a UW Green Bay decision as permitted by 19.85 1 sub A sub G, and 4, consider confer with legal counsel regarding pending or potential litigation as permitted by 19.85 1 sub G. 5, consider annual personnel evaluation as permitted by 19.85 1 sub C. And 6, consider the chancellor's and senior executives' compensation adjustment as permitted by 19.85 1 sub C.
Is there a second? Call the roll, Jim.
Regent Bailey? Regent Bradley?
Yeah, we're doing that now.
Gatto? Yes. Regent Evers? Regent Felbo?
Yes.
Regent Farrell? Regent Farrell?
She's nodding yes.
Regent Hall? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Regent Harsney? Regent Higgins? Regent Betty Deeb? Regent Milner?
Yes.
Regent Mueller? Regent Peterson? Regent Pruitt?
Excuse me.